Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm here with my good friends Nick and David, and today we're going to be
Yo,
talking about everyone's favorite DC movie, The Flash.
The biggest DC movie to hit theaters this year, unfortunately.
and also the biggest flop to hit theaters this year. Whether that's unfortunate or not, I'll leave that up to you.
The
They
funny
were
thing
hoping
about
to.
no, it's just the funny thing about that is I remember how much hate Justice League got, and like, oh my god, this is the downturn. We need the Snyder cut, and then the Snyder cut came out, and I enjoyed it a lot more, but there was still a ton of problems. And then it's just like, okay, well, is DC getting its shit together? They're like, no, it's just like one movie after another movie after another. It's just like, oh my god, what happened? What's going on?
Jeez Louise.
It's like I don't even know why. At this point, it's just like, like there's, it's so bizarre. It's just like, it's
I
it's,
was
it's not to say like don't even try, but it really is kind of like, yeah, James Gunn, hop on fucking
I
board
mean,
and try to fix this shit.
obviously we're here to talk about the one movie, and me being me, I'm gonna try my hardest not to get too sidetracked onto the
Yeah,
whole wider scope DC Warner Brothers meta narrative thing, but I was watching this compilation that a YouTuber named Movie Bob made of him accidentally unintentionally becoming the chronicler of DC's downfall across the last
wow.
10 years, and it really is just an endless stream of ill-advised decisions that were then exacerbated by COVID.
Wow.
It's like 10 hours almost of just from a Man of Steel review when that movie came out to now.
Damn,
And
it's like
they
watching
do,
Kingdom Hearts gameplay.
they do have, for me at least, three, well, not even three diamonds in the rough, but three key films um, that have done the best for them out of all the mediocrity they've been making, which is The Batman, the Suicide Squad, directed by James Gunn, and Joker. Even though Nick and I have talked at length about how kind of overrated that movie is.
See, I was thinking more just in terms of it makes sense to pick those three, but I was thinking more in terms of just the general DCEU franchise, not DC as a whole brand. And for
No,
that,
absolutely.
I'd say the biggest successes, the Suicide Squad wasn't a monetary success, but
That was almost
the
entirely because of COVID and when it came
yeah,
out.
but the ones that I'd say showed the most merit for this as a potentially workable franchise would be that, the first Shazam, the first Wonder Woman, and Aquaman.
Yeah, 100%. I'd agree with that.
But we're
So,
here to talk about this movie. So
This
let's
this
get
masterpiece.
so
so
what Nick and I typically do is we talk about our expectations going into the movie, how we felt on a first viewing, and like how we feel now.
yeah.
Um, so
And just
I'll
so it's on the record, I've seen this movie 2.5 times. I saw it once because my friend got me a free ticket, once because Brianna insisted and I saw it with her. And then I started watching it again for this discussion. And then halfway through, it was like, I know this movie well enough by now. I really don't need to finish this.
it's about the same for me. I watched it once in the theater with David, um, once again, like last week, and skimmed through it like within the past like 24 hours. So I also have a pretty solid grasp on the movie. Now going in, to I
I
was actually
for the record, I only saw it the one time. Now I do have a lot of it fresh in my mind anyways, but
Mm.
I did want to recap it before coming on here. But I was just talking to Malik about how I just didn't have the time for it. But I did bring up points that I want to bring up on this podcast that I don't think a lot of people have noticed or have talked about just yet.
Hmm.
But
that's
continue,
fine.
Malik.
Yeah. So I was actually pretty excited for this movie, primarily because I liked um, it. Less so It Chapter 2, but I thought both of those were still pretty solid films from Andy Muschietti. And with James Wan jumping back and forth between like action stuff and horror, both genres that I also really love and want to get into myself, I thought Andy Muschietti was poised to make something pretty special. So I was like looking forward to this. I'm pretty optimistic about it, and um, was I had an even worse feeling watching that movie for the first time with David than I did watching Doctor Strange. In that when I watched Doctor Strange into the Multiverse of Madness, that was my most anticipated movie of Phase Four. And when I saw the movie, I was just really really conflicted about it on first viewing. I didn't hate it, but I was conflicted. Um, when I watched this, I was like, I kind of hate this movie. Like it was immensely disappointing. And with all the real life controversy with Ezra Miller, I was willing to totally put that to the side and just look at this as its own, like as a movie, especially if it was good, and it was not good. I did not like the the ham-fisted way in which this movie goes about doing Flashpoint, which is already an overdone storyline, and like sidesteps so many key things, and the the vapid nature with this movie tries to attempt character arcs, and the really lame villains, or not even really a villain, like what am I blanking on? Zod is literally just a plot device, like just an action figure. At the same thing with the hordes of other Kryptonians that they're fighting, and no there's no real character behind any of that, and that was incredibly frustrating and odd. And like this movie wants to be an homage to Man of Steel. Um, it's 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 missing Cavill, and even though I don't even like Man of Steel or most of Zack Snyder's kind of methodology behind DCU at all, I found it really strange that this movie's trying to in some ways be like a love letter to that, even though it feels like there's no love. Like they're missing the love part. It's just a letter. You know what I mean? But
It's
yeah,
like, oh yeah, screw Cavill. He doesn't exist. We're never gonna hire him again. But also, remember Man of Steel?
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah. Overall, did not like this movie. Was disappointed by it, and I think it does not leave a good taste in people's mouth going into what James Gunn is going to have to build up from scratch next, and I think that's unfortunate. But what about you, Nick? How did you feel about the Flash?
Okay, so Malik and I have discussed this movie many times during the marketing phase, and it really is funny how this turned out because my take was always that, like, I would look at the trailers for this movie and I'd just say to myself, like, I don't see how this could possibly be the trailer for something that's good. Like, there's nothing in any of the marketing that would lead me to believe that I was going to watch a good story. I was against the idea of bringing in Michael Keaton's Batman from the start, even back when that was just concept art. As these movies have gone on, I've cared less and less for Ezra Miller's performance as the Flash. I think they were at their best in Zack Snyder's Justice League just because that's the movie that gave everyone the best material really to perform with. But between these movies and the Fantastic Beasts movies, I just don't care for Miller generally as a performer. The like ongoing year-long GTA 5 rampage that they were doing in real life, I had to imagine like how do you market a movie when its star can't really do press? It seemed like the worst case scenario. It seemed like the DCEU was going to go out with a thud, the same way that I think it kind of came in with a thud with Man of Steel, but that's a whole different thing. And then I sat down and watched the movie, and I surprisingly enjoyed myself. I'm not even going to say most of it, because when I saw this movie for the first time, it was in a packed theater, and I felt like I was going insane, because all of the fan service moments and all of the like stuff that I think was like sort of very poorly thought out attempts at getting crowd cheers surprisingly actually got crowd cheers. So there's lots of moments in my first viewing of this movie where I'm sitting there being like, what is this movie trying to do? This is a terrible choice. And around me is just endless applause, and I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. But then there's actually, like, surprisingly, me disagreeing with Malik on this, there's some character stuff here that I like. And I'm actually writing a video for my own channel about how I think this movie has a central character arc that really, really works until you get to the end and the movie shoots itself in the foot twice, shoots itself in both feet, and completely neuters all of the stuff that was working about it for most of the runtime. But this is something that we can discuss more as we get more into it. I read a tweet that really put this movie into perspective for me from like a story angle, and that's that there's only one character in this movie, and it's Barry Allen. Like, nobody else in this movie is actually a character. Zod's a plot device. Everyone's a plot device. Like Supergirl, Batman. Did Barry Allen is the only person in the film with character work to do, and I think that character stuff works, but it's not enough to carry the rest of it being so shallow. But I don't know. I saw it again with Brianna, and she really liked it. So being next to her and sort of absorbing her positive vibes, I still kind of saw the best in it. But I don't know. It's not a functional movie. It's a very, very messy thing. We're going to get into all of the different ways that it does not work. And I feel like I kind of lied at the start of this. I said I'm going to try to avoid getting into the wider DC meta narrative stuff. I don't think that can be fully divorced from this movie. I think the super messy stop start production of this movie and like its position relative to the rest of the franchise is all there on the screen and can't be avoided and is just part of it and is definitely something we're going to have to talk about. But before we get into that, David.
Yeah. I really do love your point about the character, that there really is only one character. Because when you look about how do you write character, you have to write um some kind of personal challenge they have to overcome. You have to write character development, the struggle they go through. And you're 100% right. Because we all know, it's right in our faces. We all know Supergirl has no fucking character. Like, nothing. Because the one time they give her, oh, humanity? Well, my entire experience has been torture. And then out of nowhere, when Barry needs her help for whatever reason to get hit by lightning again, even though they could have waited like 2 more minutes to see if anything happens, she shows up, magically changes her mind. Like, she literally left the freaking battlefield. She went to Zod and saw Fiora. They saw each other. Zod just let her leave. She came back to the Flash, and the Batcave was just like, oh, well, I know exactly what's going on. I'll just help you guys out. And now I changed my mind. No character development. Michael Keaton's Batman for reason for doing anything. It's a plot device. Yeah, it's just like, oh, crime's better because I did my job, but now I'm moping about it and I'm retired. It's like, okay. And like,
There's
I'm not Batman anymore. And then it's like, and now I'm Batman. Why? Why? It's like your motivations for breaking into my Batcave and using my tech to try and do what you want. motivated me and pushed me to put on the. It's just like, what are you doing? These guys are thieves. Terry McGinnis did it way better. It's like, what do you? I don't. It's very forced. I 100% agree with you. The only character is Barry, and the irony of saying that is there are 3 freaking Barrys in this movie. But we all know which Barry we're talking about. The crazy one playing GTA in real life.
That they're
And
still all the same one.
they're all the same one, and it's just I'm not. Yeah, this film going in. So when I was, let me try to explain this in the same theme we're all explaining it at the moment, which is when I saw the trailers for this. First of all, promotion material is just like, okay, this is cool, this is cute, it's a nod to this and that. But this movie has been like in production for maybe 3 years, if I remember correctly, and kept getting pushed back, and we heard nothing about it other than the fact that it's in production.
Well, they've been getting directors and writers attached and then leaving on and off since BVS came out. So
Well,
almost
yeah,
7 years.
this is Warner Brothers' track record. It's just like, we don't really care as long as it gets done, maybe. It's oh my god. But yeah, it's just like it's so difficult. Even when we finally started getting stuff, it was really, really difficult to be excited for a film. You again, it's just like you're saying the movie left a sour taste in your mouth. I already had a sour taste in my mouth from the announcement because you guys were just so bad at marketing it, at talking about it, at keeping things on the down low, behind the scenes from the get go, going on 3 years. So when we're finally getting stuff, it's just like, okay, but now I have to look at this with a very, very skewed eye. How good is this really going to be? And then when we finally got the trailer, a month before release. I don't think I can't remember the last time a movie was the trailer for, because the standard, like, okay, streaming services has kind of messed this up. Neither good nor bad, just in general, where the standard was movies would have a release date. Have a trailer come out 6 months prior to the movie because those 6 months would be spent on the marketing. With streaming services and the like, we don't really need that. But that's still kind of the standard. And Marvel, like there are statistics showing with Marvel movies, it's oh well, this is one movie that take like 7 months trailer before release date, and this movie was a month and a half, and this is like one of the shortest. I don't think any of them have beaten like, oh yeah, this is coming in 4 weeks. Please come and watch it. It's just like we didn't get anything. Maybe we got a teaser, we got a couple of posters. There was no touring. We didn't even get Sasha Cali like talking about her role, anything like that until leading like after we got the trailer. It was so out of left field and bizarre. But watching the trailer, I couldn't help but be like, "Oh, okay. This is kind of interesting." But I'm still very much on the fence of going and watching this in theaters. The only reason I saw it in theaters was because Malik and I went. There was no way I was going to go see it by myself. There's like, I'm not. I would skip it. I was while watching it, I was surprised to see how well a lot of the scenes did because it was genuinely funny in some parts. Not everything, but it was genuinely funny. It did take some interesting twists and turns, most of which I disagree with, but other interesting takes is like, oh, okay, whatever. Um, there were definitely things you can appreciate, but there is one thing I did notice, especially when you were talking about it, Nick, which was the fact that they had like the things they did really. And here's the irony of it all. They had their priorities backwards because when it came to the fanfare, when it came to their jokes, when it came to bringing in nostalgia factor like Michael Keaton's Batman, those are really, when you really think about it, those are the small stuff. Those are the things you sprinkle on to the movie to elevate it. You can't make a movie and you know, just throw those things in there and hope it's successful because you have those little things, but everything else fails. And in this movie, that's exactly what happens when it comes to the character arcs, when it comes to the motivations for anyone, literally anyone, not just Barry, anyone to do anything, none of that makes sense. It all falls apart. Everything falls apart. The plot of the film, the setting, the environment, people's motivations for doing anything. So when we go back and we think about this very forgettable film, about why it's while we're talking about it, but this film, and we're like, well, why was it so bad? Even though there was genuinely good parts, it's because they knew how to write the funny bits and the good bits, and how to use that nostalgia factor of throwing Michael Keaton in there. But they didn't know how to weave everything in between. They didn't know what the core of the movie was supposed to be. They knew it was supposed to be based off of the Flashpoint comics, and that was it. Like, are we gonna go back and read it? No, we're not gonna go back and read it. It's just going to be Flashpoint. And I think that's really why it fails at the end of the day. Because as a movie, terrible. But with the little stuff sprinkled in between, they did very, very well. But that's not how good storytelling works.
I don't feel, I definitely don't feel like this movie was made by people that even read Flashpoint, much less have a genuine love and affinity for Flash as a character. Now, while I do appreciate that he is, in fact, and like this, that, like, they don't deserve a cookie for this, but you know, he is like the main character, has a character arc. But as Nick said, the ending kind of fumbles that entirely. And with you not really doing any solid character work for literally anyone else in the movie, um, you can't, because the thing is, like, characters, the way you inform characters how they interact with other characters. And so if you don't actually have literally any other character in your piece, your protagonist doesn't have anyone to bounce off of and challenge directly necessarily. Like, he has challenges in the sense that he has plot devices and obstacles to overcome.
I mean, he has himself, which I
Himself,
think mostly works.
Actually, it'd be a funny edit if you take out all of the funny bits and the really like specific interactions. For example, like Barry with himself in his room, like take those out, and you just edit the entire movie with Barry talking to a wall. You get the same exact movie. You get the same exact movie because he really doesn't have anyone to bounce off of. He really doesn't. He
Well,
might as well be talking to himself.
yeah, I mean, less figuratively. So I think there is enough variation between the two Barrys that they can kind of carry their scenes and carry the movie, because for me, like, all of the most compelling stuff is how are these two Barrys different, and sort of the fact that Barry Prime, I guess we'll call him, can't even really interact properly with himself because that's just how maladjusted he is. And he's created this new world and new life for himself by saving his mom, but he's in the process created this version of him that he can only kind of relate to, and he can't even really form a great rule. Like, the scene that I think exemplifies it best, and I don't know if either of you guys saw this, but there was talk about how Ezra Miller is the one who ended up writing that scene. And I had to make a post that was like, if I had a nickel for every time there was a big multiverse superhero movie where one of the most emotional scenes involved a character talking to himself that was written by the star on the day of, then I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that that happened twice because it happened here and in Multiverse of Madness. But it's the scene where he's like, they're in the Batcave, and it's like, well, you used a monkey as a dartboard. Like, why are you being so mean to me? And then they kind of come around by the end of the scene to like an understanding, to where Barry Prime is like, yeah, I'm not really good with people. It turns out, even myself. And the younger Barry's like, yeah, I get it. I can be a little obnoxious. And it's like an actually really good bit of character interaction. And I wish there was some more of that, but I think when the movie's at its best, it's like it's getting at that because the thing that I think is at the center of this movie and what immediately takes us to separating it from the Warner Brothers miasma of it all is going to be difficult to impossible is how Barry's central character flaw in this film is that he's obsessed with fixing everything and he's just too solution oriented and too obsessed with finding the perfect like fix for everything for his own good. And in introduced in the scene with the flashback with his mom where we have the most on the nose like bit of dialogue explicitly stating the theme that I've maybe ever heard, where like the mom turns to the camera and it's like not everything has a solution, sometimes you just have to let it go. And on first watch I'm like, okay, I get it, that's the theme of the movie, all right. But that really is like the guiding flaw that informs every single thing that Barry does throughout the movie. And younger Barry doesn't have that as bad because he's never really had to face real problems because his mom's still alive. And then we get to the end and it turns out, oh no, this ingrained character flaw that's been the cause of all of the plot problems in the movie is still something that younger Barry has, and that's the tragedy of it, is that he's now succumbing to this flaw that our Barry Prime has been succumbing to his whole life. And now the circumstances are right that when it happens with young Barry, he literally turns into this horrifying, monstrous shell of himself. And it's actually really sad and really effective. And I can't help but think that that's also a metaphor for Warner Brothers, who, from the beginning of this franchise, like Man of Steel happens, and it is not received the way that Warner Brothers wanted it to be received at all. It makes money, but it didn't make the money they wanted it to make. Critics didn't really care for it. Fans just went back and forth, could not agree on it. And for the past 10 years since Man of Steel, it feels like Warner Brothers has been Barry Allen. Like, we can fix it, we can fix it, we can fix it. And everything that they've done has been so reactive and so attempting to find a solution for a thing that cannot be easily solved. And now with this movie, we have witnessed the dark Flash version of Warner Brothers, where they're just a shell of themselves, a hollow husk, trying to fix the same problem ad infinitum until they're basically a monster.
I think that's a brilliant assessment, or observation, just because, like, just comparing real life Warner Brothers to Barry in the movie, and not to get into the problems with not including Reverse Flash because we'll talk about that later. But when you look at how Barry tries to solve all of his freaking problems, and it's all the wrong, it's all the wrong things. Like, oh, my mom died. Well, why did she die? Well, it clearly wasn't because a murderer came into the house and killed her. No, it's because we forgot a can of soup, a can of sauce. So I'll just give her the can of sauce. It's like, no, of course that shit didn't work because that wasn't the problem. And it's just like, I think that's a perfect observation and like a comparison because yeah, it's here's a problem. We want a solution. We'll just go the wrong way about solving it. Oh, it's a problem again. Okay. It's like what Einstein said. It's uh you can't solve problems with the same thinking that you used to create them. And it's like it really is one bad thing, one bad decision after another. It really, really is. And it's so funny that The Flash exemplifies that. Like at the end, technically, like canonically, if that even matters anymore, which really doesn't, but at the end of the DCEU, it's just like, oh, well, I guess we're gonna restart because now we're Warner Discovery and we're merged, so we're rebooted. So I guess the Flash is over, and we're like, oh, it's a metaphor. Ooh.
um, I want to go ahead and get my most shallow complaints out of the way before digging into the more meaty stuff. So
Okay.
I'm typically not a
I did
guy.
not like his suit. Okay, now continue.
um, I yeah, I don't. I'm not in love with the suit either. I do appreciate them trying to go in a more like comic book direction with the suit as opposed to all the damn armor. But
Hmm.
the something about the helmet is kind of off, and really like the suit in general and how it's actually applied is frankly horrendous. Like it looks
Hmm.
like he's out in a walking PS3 video game suit the entire film, and it takes me out because it never looks real. And I've had this conversation with Nick about No Way Home. There are scenes. It's most of it in the third act, but when all three Spider-Men are swinging around and fighting, I am deeply frustrated because they look more fake and rubbery in that sequence than any of them ever have in their own solo movies, and that's ridiculous. Um, but with most of the integrated suit, the one that Tom Holland has to wear towards the latter half of the movie, that's an entirely CG suit imposed upon the black and red one that he was wearing for most of the movie. But for the most part, it's still like well integrated. It's not yanking. I mean, it is kind of over designed, but it's not taking too much of my attention in the wrong way, in that I can feel that this is not a real thing that he's actually wearing.
Yeah.
Um, and with the Flash, like
I think the worst, just as a side note, I think the worst like CG character in that film was Sandman. You should have just brought him back. Like the dude is still alive.
I think that might have been a COVID restrictions thing.
yeah, and
Why was he the only one who didn't show up though? If that's the case.
he was the
We'll
only one.
also
Also,
re-siphons.
yeah, Lizard didn't show up in person either. The actor that plays the Lizard, he was
Yeah,
never
but
actually.
like he was a lizard the whole time, so I wasn't really.
But like even when we get him back, we're still just using archive footage.
Yeah, that
Yep.
was a bit. That was lame. I saw that immediately. I was like, I remember this. I saw Amazing Spider-Man once, and was like, I remember this exact scene.
I
It's
think
like,
they would have got those guys, but practically couldn't make it happen.
Because of COVID. Yeah, and you
oh,
can feel it, and not just that, but even in um, the some of the sets and stuff, and how the scenes are shot in general. Like that was definitely a movie that was heavily impacted by COVID.
yeah, okay.
Um,
Going back to the Flash, just as
yeah,
a side note, but yeah, but going back to the Flash.
Speaking of the effects, which I assume is what you were
Oh no, we should save that for last. That's a whole deep dive.
no,
Like, what
no,
the fuck
we're
happened?
talking about that now. We can go ahead and get into it
Oh
now.
no, I still wanted to talk about how bad the suit was.
Oh
well,
yeah,
because I mean, Malik, you say shallow complaints, but I'd argue the effects for this movie in particular, not a shallow complaint because it's so pervasive. So maybe
this
let's tackle the small
It
fry
really
that
is.
is the suit first.
It really is a sore thumb. Both meta, like it. It's just yeah. I just like artistically, I'm not a fan of the design at all. It just for the character like the Flash, it doesn't make sense for him to have a suit that looks like that. And even like functionally, I like the only thing I don't even like the one thing I can appreciate about the suit is that they've tried to implement the suit coming out of the ring and explaining the comic book science behind how it inflates when it comes in contact with oxygen and whatnot. But even that doesn't work for two reasons. One, like I appreciate that they tried to do that, but I wholeheartedly believe, like when it comes to comic book adaptations, especially ones that are like from the freaking 50s and 60s, where they're just making things up as they go just for the sake of it. Like certain things we just should not adapt to television to television or feature films. It just because it's all about being grounded and suspending our disbelief to a point where we can watch it, enjoy it, and believe it, but not take us out of it because it's too far. One of the things like Superman wearing underwear. Like you can have Superman wear underwear and wear trunks or whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing. But it doesn't look and feel more tangible. This is why I loved Man of Steel's suit. I'm not like it's not perfect by any means. It's far, in my opinion, it's far better than the later iteration, where it's Batman v Superman and Justice League. I don't like those suits. I think they should have stuck with the original Man of Steel suit. Regardless, Even that suit wasn't entirely perfect, but it was really, really good. But I think one of the best decisions they made was they didn't have trunks. And just because culturally, for Krypton or for Earth, like how do you make that make sense for a modern era? You just take it away. Just leave it out. And now it's more tangible, it's more believable. It feels like it fits within the real world. Stuff like that. The TV show The Flash implements the suit coming out of the ring, but it's like he barely does it, and when he does, it's really just for the sake of a transition, and it's just I don't care for it. I think having the suit come out of the ring, it should be eliminated entirely, just because not because the science, pseudoscience, science fiction, explanation for how it works just doesn't hold up anymore, as well as it's not really useful. I don't agree. Personally, I don't agree it's useful. We can definitely do without it. The Flash is a character that is so fast. He doesn't actually need to have the suit on him. He's not, and it's so weird too. Like, why does the Flash have an Ant-Man suit or an Atom Man suit? Why do characters that have nothing to do with shrinking or growing powers or tech have shrinking and power, shrinking and growing tech? It's
Because we have to do the obligatory this character is also a super genius thing, and so he can just make a
No, no,
fun
no, no,
size
no. I do
version.
not agree with that. I absolutely hate that because that's always forced. That is always forced and it's always poorly written. The Flash is a smart character. He is. We could have really seen him shine when it came to explaining the multiverse, but he didn't because we had Keaton explain the multiverse. Someone who's never went through the multiverse or never concerned him. Now,
Oh
Batman is a
boy, we can talk about that when we get to his character.
yeah, yeah. So I'll leave that for the side, but it was just for the sake of having Keaton say something. But we'll leave that to the side. Like
I will
Barry,
say I generally disagree just on the points you're making about the suits. Like, I don't know. Yes, on some level, we're still stuck with the whole thing that we started Man of Steel with, which is trying to take place in a somewhat grounded reality, but a long time ago, and especially by the time we get to this movie, we've kind of abandoned that. I think like superficial sort of things like that is the kind of silly stuff that these movies should always embrace when they can. Like, I think that I don't think there's a good Superman costume that doesn't have the trunks. Like, Cavill's costume comes closest, but I
mhm.
think you need those for like breaking up the constant blue as just an unbroken solid color.
Well, what do
And
you
I
think of
just think,
Tyler Hoechlin's suit
yeah, something like that. And oh, you mean the yeah,
in
no.
Superman and Lois?
I don't really like it there either.
Okay.
Like I think putting aside that like it never really made sense in universe because from the beginning like having capes and trunks on these suits was like an homage to wrestlers, but I just think like it looks better, like it suits these characters more, and by that same token I like having the Flash suit in the ring and he presses the button and he puts it on instantly just because it looks cooler. And like that was one of the few moments where the movie was like aiming for coolness aesthetically that I think actually worked. Like when he does the suit up in the third act, and I'm like, ah, yeah, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, this it is 100% about personal preference. For me, I'm a huge sucker for sci-fi that is grounded. That even if like it's still science fiction and it doesn't really exist in the real world, it's so close to where even when you try to question its validity, it's it's still explainable. It still feels tangible. Um like stuff like that. I love how even before Man of Steel, people were getting in the habit of, well, how does Superman fly? Or how is Superman so strong? Well, I guess Krypton's gravity was is significantly heavier than Earth's. So just they have a naturally higher bone and muscle density, just normal, outside of the influence of a yellow sun. How does like stuff or jump higher or stuff like that? Like, how does that work? I dig that stuff. But it is 100%, yeah, it is about just personal preference. One of the reasons why I think the Flash's suit doesn't work in the movie is because it's not all spandex. It's not all like thin material. You have a hard hat, like a hard helmet. You
I
have
mean,
all
it's
the
it's
belts.
better than if they tried to do this with the Justice League suit.
No, 100%. But then again, if that was the problem, was conflicting with hard materials and soft materials, just don't have the ring. Because you can have the ring and then have to explain everything else that works with the ring, or just don't have it. And he just has a suit.
To be honest, I'm a little more in agreement with Nick on this.
Mhm.
I don't need every comic book thing to be quote unquote grounded, because grounded and believability are not inherently the same thing. And
It's definitely about execution, 100%.
yeah, for me, it's just, am I enjoying it, and does the world feel like it has a cohesive internal logic? That's all I really need. If you're going to set rules, then be consistent with them and follow them. But I don't need you to try to have this one toe in the realm of quote unquote reality, because like it's superpowers, it's aliens, it's all kinds of craziness that we're accepting. I just need the world to feel like there's some level of internal logic that makes some degree of sense. That's not to say like you have to be ham-fisted by the rules of reality, like as we know it. You can embellish and come up with your own internal logic for things. It just has to remain consistent. And for better or worse, well, I say for better or worse. To be honest, I honestly am kind of conflicted on whether or not this movie even is consistent with the rules that it lays out. I
It's
know,
it's not, and it's not
yeah,
even a matter of not being consistent. Like, I'll let you finish in a second, but it's a matter of they introduce things like rules, mechanics that they're going to operate by, and then they just don't come back.
And like some of those rules that they introduce in this film, we never saw them in previous films with Ezra's Flash, as well as it only serves the purpose or becomes a plot device or whatever when they want it to be. For example, why is the Flash lightning blue? Then it turns to yellow because he's wearing the suit. Oh, well, the suit just so happens to regulate because my lightning needs regulating. It's like, when was this a thing? But then it becomes, oh, well, now we have lightning powers that we could just shoot people, Kryptonians, with that somehow hurts them. Like, we never see this in any other Snyderverse films, and we definitely never see it become necessary or useful any other time until unless they deliberately write it in.
that is part of the issue with you being handed the baton to a franchise, and the previous shepherds of this property did not place in things that you wanted to use for the character, where it's like, um, you know, Flash is supposed to be able to. Well, honestly, in a lot of ways, this is a little more restrictive than what Snyder was doing. Like he has to eat this amount of food, and like regulating electricity, and it's trying to do the Spider-Man has a limited source of webbing thing, but it's not as remotely interesting or impactful as that, because as you said, David, it's just something they kind of forget about, and it doesn't end up really mattering later.
Like, it's crazy how we're going to have to talk about just the first 10, 15 minutes of this movie and how it basically puts a gun to your head and says either you are down for this tone or not. But it's
Yeah.
crazy how, like, Barry's need to eat to maintain his energy is the crux of that sequence. Like, everything with the babies, everything like leading up to that is all about setting up and impressing the importance of this one mechanic of how his powers work. and then it does not matter for the rest of the movie. It's crazy.
I absolutely that like one thing I think they did really really well was establishing that because we very very rarely see the Flash's primary, I would argue his primary weakness, which is his body eats through calories practically instantly. He has to constantly be eating and fueling up on not just 2,000 calories per day. It's 2,000 calories every 5 minutes. Like this guy needs to eat. He needs to consume. It's one of the biggest drawbacks to being having a connection to the Speed Force. They don't explain it that way, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is the fact that they're finally implementing this, and he's smart enough. Now we don't know if this is, and here's the thing: we don't know if it's him or we don't know if it's Bruce and Bruce's involvement, but it doesn't really matter. He's smart enough to keep track of it. He's smart enough to have a watch that keeps track of it somehow. I don't really know, but okay. And then yeah, they practically forget about it. And here's the thing too with that: then in the entire sequence at the beginning, whatever my problems with that sequence or the first half of the film, outside of that, just talking specifically about his energy, I was never concerned about whether or not he would make it because we never saw his powers fail. We never did. Like he maybe was going slightly slower, but that's a difference between a nanosecond and half a nano, or like a 1/25th of a nanosecond. Like that was it. He ate like half a burrito, and apparently that was enough. Like he could have finished the rest of the burrito, and he didn't bother because the stakes weren't even that high. He's like, "Oh my god, I'm starving, so I'm going to run out, become the Flash, and then not do that because I'm distracted by people." But anyways, keep going, and then save all these babies, creepy babies, and like all this dog and all these people. Still not really eat, but like I have to eat because this is very very bad and this is very drastic and this is high stakes. It's like it didn't feel like that at all because he didn't show me anything that was really high stakes. His powers didn't fail on him. He wasn't at risk of going comatose, being like deprived of nutrients or food. Like none of that actually happened. It just wasn't. It was like a health bar on the top of your screen in a video game that was looked like it was going down, but not really.
And then ending that sequence with yet another very on the nose thematic
Yeah.
thesis statement from the annoying barista guy who literally turns to the camera and goes, "It's not about her, it's about you. You need to let go of the past."
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
thought that was just funny because it totally, I didn't even register the first time.
Yeah. I
So
didn't even know.
my
I didn't recognize that happened. Wow.
so of my I have many issues, particularly with the opening of this movie. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the visual effects. But my God, those babies! Like, if you can't,
When those
if,
babies showed up, I
Yeah.
turned to Brianna and said, "You understand now which movie you're watching."
And I thought the dog was fine. I thought the lady was fine. But when you had all those babies, like what happened?
it
What
could
happened?
not be more aggressively uncanny valley.
And the
And if
crazy part too is when it was all said and done and he was taking the baby out of the microwave, it still looked terrible.
um, okay,
Well,
okay, okay.
it's
So
still
hold
CGI
on,
in the
Nick,
microwave
hold
because
on,
obviously
Nick,
they're
hold
not
on.
going to put a real baby in a microwave.
Hold on a second. So I'm glad you brought up the microwave because it's fucking hilarious. It's stupid. So he puts a baby in the microwave. It's not plugged into anything, but we still hear a ding question mark. So like,
Yeah.
was it was that baby like actually cooking for a few milliseconds? Like, what was happening?
No.
So
Yeah.
funny.
And it's again, it goes and even though it's funny, and I do like the creative choice of, oh, what if we throw a baby in the microwave? That is genuinely funny. But again, now you're establishing rules. Or even if you don't establish rules, there's an expectation of certain rules to we expect wind to have an effect on people. It's just an expectation of how things are supposed to work. Why does the microwave ding? It's not like it's still the expectation of how the world works, which is why,
Real
it's
funny.
about suspending your disbelief. And it just, yeah, it's like sometimes, and it's just like I've seen some of this in movies that try to force a comedic element. And we've seen this a lot of time in Justice League as well. Like when the Flash just falls on top of Wonder Woman, like it's like haha, but also it's
Yes,
exactly. Or let's do we even need to talk about the scene where Batman has this freaking ninja has no idea Wonder Woman's lasso is on his hand.
Oh
The
boy.
world's greatest detective is spilling the beans, and
and
just like,
I'm
oops.
See,
I'm so
that's
done
the
with
thing
the
where
joke.
people are like, that's not even how the lasso of truth works. And like, I
It's
don't
not.
know,
It's just comedic effect, and it's so lazy. But
because
I
it's
like,
not even that Bruce is dumb for not realizing that it's on his hand. It's that, fine, like, even if he does realize it's on his hand, it shouldn't be a concern because she didn't ask him a question.
yeah, it's just like the lasso of truth is not tell me everything without a filter. Like you can't help yourself from talking. It doesn't. If that's the case, put the lasso of truth on like introverts. They'll become your best friend because they can't shut the hell up.
Yeah, it's not just like compels you to speak unprompted.
Yeah, it's every single time we've ever seen that happen in any medium, it's always for comedic effect every single time. And what's crazy is again, it's even though it's this different movie, it's the same universe. And I don't care if you're switching directors, you have to respect the material that came prior because those are the foundation of what you're doing now. If you want to build on top of something or add something that doesn't retcon or ruin previous films, do it. But don't just throw it at well because I'm a new director coming in and I want to make my, I just absolutely have to change things because now it's my interpretation and it's my thing. It's like, but it's not though. It's collaborative. This is how these art forms work. It's really collaborative, so you can't shit on like the previous things. So what I'm referring to, what I mentioned earlier about the lightning, but with Wonder Woman specifically, we saw how the lasso of truth worked in the first Wonder Woman, and they did it so well because we saw what happens when you try to fight back. You don't
Mm.
have to talk. You like it almost feels like it's burning inside of you. Like you just have to let it out because the only thing you can say is the truth. So your only option is not to speak, but they're forcing you to trying to like yank it out of you. So that hurts. We saw how that worked. And out of here, it's just like, oh yeah, like I could be helping people with my money, but instead I just like that's so poorly done.
The
And I
most
understand it's a joke
generic,
against it's a jab against Batman and he's a billionaire, so why doesn't he do this instead of that? I
the
think there
most
are smart.
generic, overdone,
Yeah, it's
like
just like,
Batman joke.
and then we go into Blue Beetle, like, oh, Batman's a fascist. It's like, is this even the same universe? Like, how do you know that? It's
Well, that's
so
clearly just a character having
yeah,
an opinion.
yeah, it's just as usual. Yeah.
So, Nick, if you had told me that when we had first watched Wonder Woman and talked about it, that in what was it, 4 maybe 5 years time, that I would be so sick of this character, and she would be the unofficial Stan Lee of the DCEU, and we would put her in practically everything we could, and it would be the most like forced, weird, ham-fisted thing, and it would feel so awkward, and they would feel the need to make like a blatantly sexual joke every time they introduce her too, like that.
How how do you go from this character who, when her movie came out in 2017, it was seen as this big deal, like she, even more than Wonder Woman already inherently is, because like that's her nature, seen as like this iconic, like feminist thing, and then slowly, like not even slowly, like pretty much immediately after the 2017 movie, starting with Justice League and then basically never changing after that, she just becomes this sex object who's entirely defined by her relationship with men, who's always being framed as like, oh, she's so pretty, like she's so, like I'm attracted to her, that's the main thing about her character. And it's like she's in that in her own sequel. It's
and we also made
Yeah.
her a
crazy.
racist.
Yeah, it's really bad. And then it's just like all the criminals are just standing around like, hey, hey, do you know how you know when Wonder Woman's showing up? How? when you start hearing, and you just see her on the top of the ledge somewhere. Like the second you hear that, it's like, wow, where is she?
Or the primal wailing from Zack Snyder's Justice League, though.
It's just like, it's so weird because the first time I saw that, I was like, oh no, this is really bad. Is when, oh no, Shazam and Shazam 2, like, oh my god, he's dead, and it's a funeral, like, it's like out of nowhere. Like, lady, I respect you, but this is inappropriate.
You
Wrong
were at
time.
a funeral, miss.
We were mourning. It's like, oh my god, it's so out of place. And then they did it again in the Flash. It's like, oh my god.
And that's another thing of like this movie ends up encapsulating the whole sort of failed DCEU experiment, which is like we realized in 2017 that this was a character whose movie people seem to like. And like between the first Wonder Woman and people kind of calling her one of the best things about BVS, Warner Brothers looked at that and was like, okay, so then the solution to our problem is to put Gal Gadot in everything, and the goodwill of Wonder Woman's just going to translate. And it feels like they took their time doing that, and now it's all like it's so backloaded. It's happening a bunch of times where like the goodwill has worn off. Her sequel came out and people didn't like it, and you've kind of squandered it. And now we're ending again with The Flash, where maybe it was a good idea at one point, but it's so reactionary, and now it's just made your movie worse.
Yeah,
It's very exciting for the 12 people that are still like massive fans of this iteration of Wonder
yeah,
Woman.
and it's so, and you see like the executives in like Warner Brothers, when one thing goes right and they all turn into Adam Driver, more,
Yep.
more, and it's just like there's no thought behind it. It's just we need more, and it's so bad. It's really you could tell that whatever care and love and attention that is put into any of these films are really like just a handful of crew, and then it's like everyone else, it's just not there. So it's really, it genuinely is disappointing because like again, I know we're talking about the Flash, but just to on a kind of end the note, unless you guys want to say something else about Wonder Woman, but just to end the note on this Wonder Woman subject, I was never really a fan of Gal Gadot's casting as Wonder Woman. It's nothing against her. I just don't see her as Wonder Woman. She's not Wonder Woman in my eyes. But the first Wonder Woman was really, I had the only issues I really had was with the ending, with how her interactions and whatever in the fight between
Oh yeah, like
the god of Ares,
great.
yeah. But outside of that, it was a really, really good movie. Like, I'm not even a Wonder Woman fan, and I really liked that movie.
Same.
So I was like, I don't even care that it's Gal Gadot in it, because again, I'm not a fan of her. Like, I'm not a fan of her. I'm indifferent. I just don't see her as Wonder Woman, and it really was a good movie. This was like everything, literally every other appearance or everything after that, just no.
So since we're on the scene with Batman and Wonder Woman, I'd also like to talk about Affleck because I feel so bad for this poor man. Because,
I'll tell you what, if anyone makes it out of this movie, quote unquote, unscathed, I think it's Ben Affleck.
Yeah,
or Jeremy Irons. Don't forget, Alfred was in this movie. I completely forgot.
Oh, yeah.
So with Affleck, the suit is terrible.
I agree. I do agree. It feels like a cheaper version, a cosplay.
Yeah, that suit looks utterly ridiculous. As for his role in the film, I do appreciate that more. I don't know if tender is the right word, but that scene that he has with Barry where he warns him, like, yeah, no, our scars make us who we are. Even if you could, I wouldn't want you going back and mucking around in my past. Like, I am who I am because of what's happened to me. I really liked that, but I feel bad for him because he was really taking a chance on, like, being cast in this role as Batman in the first place back when Snyder cast him. And Snyder has utterly fumbled the ball at every conceivable turn. And I think Affleck was a great choice. He could have been a wonderful Batman, much like Cavill, but he never had a good script to work with.
Agreed.
I'd say
Genuinely
he got
agree.
close with Zack Snyder's Justice League.
He
No,
did.
I don't agree with that. I think the best we got, unfortunately, but the best version of Batfleck we got was in BVS, especially the warehouse scene. That's peak, and everything else was trying to reach that peak again, and it never quite did,
I think
or
that's a good
completely fall.
action scene, but I think his characterization in BVS is pretty uniformly awful.
No, I agree. The entire movie was just his. Oh my god, he's a god, so I must kill him out of nowhere. It's so bad,
He's
but
the
as
dyslexic Punisher in a Batman suit.
it's so weird, and like it just doesn't work. If you want to go that route, do dark build up because please don't do it. Build up
If
to
I were Ben
Dark Knight's
Affleck,
metal.
if I were Ben Affleck, I would never engage with superhero media again
He
because
probably never will. Yeah.
I decided to
Mm,
play Daredevil, and
yeah.
like that movie was also bad, but he's given a fine enough performance, and that stigma like sticks with him basically until BVS comes out because he gets announced as Batman, and people are like, Daredevil, oh, he's gonna screw this up the way he screwed that up, like it was his fault somehow. And now, post BVS, he can't shake this damn role, and like the mushroom cloud of Batman v Superman has stuck to him like it stuck to this entire damn franchise for 7 years.
It really is a shame because there's a lot of one, he's a really, really good actor, and he was like there was so much potential for him to be a really great Batman, but it never let him. The script never allowed him to shine. And I agree with you. I don't agree that he should never do superhero films again, but I do agree that it is very smart for him not to. Because if
Yeah,
you
I
want to
don't
look,
think he should or shouldn't do anything. If I was him, I would
no,
never do
a
superhero
hun-
films again.
100%. Because if we look at in contrast someone who has had a similar history with starting out in superhero movies and it going badly, actually so badly it tanked his career for a number of years. But then with the right script and the right director and the right collaborative work, because it really did take him to really push for this. Ryan Reynolds,
Mm-hmm.
Green Lantern. So movie was so bad, they have not touched Green Lantern since. And they're trying now, but I am not convinced that is going to be good in the slightest. But okay, regardless, they're only now thinking about it. But couldn't get work at all because of how bad Green Lantern was. Not the fault of Ryan Reynolds. Does Deadpool so much success you can't even you can't have a conversation without bringing Ryan Reynolds up. So, like he's
Yeah.
in everything. Mint Mobile is like fucking football and shit. So it's like he's in everything. And then like so but I do agree with you. Like Ben Affleck, it's just because Ryan Reynolds has success doesn't necessarily mean Ben Affleck will, but it's also he needs time. He needs time and a good script. That's it.
And I think this movie, what frustrates me about the movie overall is that it is what so many detractors of No Way Home pretend that movie is. So it's like the movie doesn't hold up really at all. Without when you take away like the fan service, there's not much holding the movie together at all, with the exception of the arc that our lead like Barry Prime is on, and even then, so much of that is muddled and ruined by the time you get to the end. The it was I'm actually glad. I'm actually very, very glad and grateful that I didn't see the movie. So me and David, we didn't go on opening weekend. I think we went later, and the crowd we happened to be with was not honestly not a bunch of devout Flash fan or even DC fans in general. And all the big moments you would expect for the crowd to like get up and cheer and scream crickets.
Yeah, so there were laughs. There were definitely laughs, but it was not like Star Wars opening weekend where everyone was losing their shit because they saw a light in the corner of the screen. Like, what does that mean? The deeper meaning. Like, it was none of that. Like, people laughed at how bad things were. People laughed at how there were genuinely good jokes. And then for a lot of the other scenes too, it's just, okay, we'll
Like
see what happens next.
yeah, so when Keaton does his whole like I'm Batman thing, there's like no reaction
Yeah,
from the
there
audience.
really isn't. But also, let's be honest, it's one of those cases where it's very forced. That's a very unnatural scene. But also, we saw it in the trailer, so there's no excitement for that, anyways. And what's weird about that scene is they do it like kind of twice in a way, where he doesn't say I'm Batman, but like they do kind of the same scene on two separate occasions. He does like I'm Batman, and then later on, he's like, "Let's get nuts."
Ugh.
It's like, okay.
And that doesn't even play as a natural reaction to what was
Neither of
said.
them do. Yeah, it is very, very forced. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier is I don't care for the nostalgia as long as it's good, but nostalgia is a small that's fluff. That is not what carries films. And they
Okay.
did a lot of they tried so much effort on fluff, so the rest of the film was just terrible.
Warning. Now that we're on the topic of the nostalgia, I don't
Mhm.
think we can turn back until we've talked about the CGI corpses because
Oh,
because
the
again,
multiverse coliseum.
my first screening did have all those cheer moments. Like they were going crazy at Let's Get Nuts. They were cheering their heads off at I'm Batman. And they were cheering at all of the weird out of place CGI cameos. And when people around me started cheering at the appearance of Nicolas Cage, I
Mhm.
felt like I'd entered Bizarro World because there's no way that an audience of like normal people, that's not a reference to a movie.
That's a
Like,
reference to a dead concept.
yes, it's a reference to Kevin Smith talking at a university about a movie that almost happened. And
Yeah.
like, yes, we got that documentary that I actually need to rewatch that documentary. It was a very good movie, The Death of Superman Lives.
Yeah.
But like that's I did. I don't understand. Like I have to have been surrounded by just the most online, like into the discourse people imaginable, which it was all like a lot of like people who would get premiered like Thursday night premiere tickets. I suppose that makes sense. But I couldn't believe that that moment was getting like such a huge pop out of people. It's like you can't stop your story dead in its tracks to reference movies that have nothing to do with this movie and then reference a thing that will stop dead for 20, 30 seconds to reference a thing that never got made. What are you doing?
Yeah,
And make my eyes and my brain bleed because
it
not only
is
is it super
yeah.
uncanny CGI, but like Nick Cage is still alive. Like, what are you doing? He doesn't say no to anything.
Did he
He's
know
not.
they were doing this? I wouldn't be surprised if they did not call him for this.
Actually, fun fact, when we saw the I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but the like not Nick Cage Superman, not Christopher Reeve Superman, but the very
George
first one
Reeves?
George Reeves, where we also saw um Adam West and Robin and whatnot. We saw their version of the Flash. First of all, why didn't you use John Wesley? Like that didn't make any sense. You should have just used him. But they used the version of the Flash from the Flash TV show, the younger guy who played Zoom. He didn't even know that they were using his likeness. He had no clue. So not
That's
only was it an odd choice because they could have just used John Wesley's, I think it's Sniper or something like that. They didn't even bother, and they used him. And like, I think it was because they just didn't want to pay them.
Which is crazy because that
Yeah.
can't be legal.
Well, look at what's going on with the strike. I wonder if there was some backhand deal that they just weren't aware of, or it's like, let's take our chances, see if they sue, because that's always in the realm of possibility as well, where okay, well, we did this, but are you going to sue us for using your likeness without your permission? But now with all the strikes going on, we don't know, because I don't know if anyone actually spoke to them about, hey Nick Cage, how do you feel about being in the Flash? Did you know this was happening? Are you getting paid for that likeness being used? Like, I don't know. But because like they're trying to use actors' likeness just for like a day's work and then own their likeness for all
And
eternity, I think that was kind of like a stepping stone to see if can we get away with this. But I don't know. It's just speculation. But it is bizarre. I don't even think Nick Cage knew. I would suspect that he had no idea.
and in which case that's ridiculous.
Yeah, very disrespectful too. I wonder if the Christopher Reeves Foundation knew that they were using his likeness in the film.
I highly doubt it. And
Well, we all know like the deal with why George Reeves in particular is terrible, right?
I'm not too familiar.
Okay, so I think on principle, like literally resurrecting dead people with CGI for something this shallow and useless and not even relevant to the story that it's in, on principle, I already think that's gross. But George Reeves in particular strikes a lot of people, including myself, the wrong way because, like, being Superman ruined George Reeves' career, and like the contract that he was in did not allow him to like ever shake that role, and it horribly stunted his career and like really affected him and possibly drove him to kill himself among other things. And so it just leaves a real bad gross taste in the mouth.
That's very fascinating. That's the equivalent. That's almost as if Warner Bros. Is trying to say, "Oh yeah, don't forget we own you. We
Ugh.
own all of you
Don't forget you're here forever, or at least until we go bankrupt.
in perpetuity for all
yeah,
eternity."
it's so, as Nick was saying, it's so shallow.
Yeah,
Doesn't do anything for the story, and it just yanks me out and makes me feel gross. Like I felt sick to my stomach watching that.
yeah. I thought it was really cool to see Nick Cage in the role, only because, first of all, and I did see Superman Lives, the documentary. I'm in full agreement that movie never should have been made. I agree that I think that movie would have been terrible. It fell apart because it really was going to be a bad movie. I think Nick Cage as a Superman casting would have been bad just in general as well. Um, I thought it was cool to see Nick Cage, like, even if it was a very bad DG double and CGI and whatnot. I thought it was cool only for the fact that we never would have seen this otherwise. So to me, it was neat. But even after the movie, Malik and I briefly spoke to someone who was sitting next to us in the theater, and he's like, this movie really is like, because of all the nods and the fluff, again, the sprinkles on top. The majority of that is if you know, because if you don't know, you can't really appreciate it.
Brianna Brianna has seen the Kevin Smith university lecture thing,
Mhm.
but like it took her a second because when he showed up, I had to turn to her after the spider thing, and I was like, and then a
You get it?
giant fucking spider showed up, and
Yeah.
then she lost her shit.
Yeah. Look, obviously that was never going to work. But for me, as like, I at least got to see that, and that was neat. So I appreciate that. But just it still looked bad. It still looked very like everything about it, and everything about, including everybody else. As a artist myself, like, I didn't like the interpret. And to be fair to them, we don't know what the multiverse looks like. We actually don't even know we cannot confirm if the multiverse exists. So interpreting visually what a multiverse could look like is challenging in its own right, even though it has been done before in many different forms, and through various mediums, whether it be comic books, novels, visualizations, or movies or TV shows. I think this is one of the worst interpretations. Why is it a planetary coliseum looking thing where everyone on the border is like freeze framed? It just does, and like Flash is the center of that universe. Like, how narcissistic do you have to be? Do you have to be for Flash to be the center of a multiverse?
Well, I
It's
think the implication is he's at the center because he's like in this Chrono Bowl thing, and like we see the other Flash running around in his center, but
yeah,
he also is time traveling, and so like he looks at the camera, and
yeah.
I think I guess the implication is supposed to be that he sees like I don't know. I
It's
reading
really bad.
into it, I think is giving the scene too much credit
Yeah,
because and this is why I warned that we wouldn't be able to turn back because now we have to talk about not just on principle why it's bad, but why it's bad for the scene and the movie as a whole, which is like I genuinely think that the central character arc stuff works well enough that if the scene had just played and it had just been hang on one second.
okay. But Malik, like it was just such a as a concept, just have like everyone freeze from like it's I understand if the concept came out of because I can see this and kind of appreciate it where it's like a film, like actual like film, and why so everyone from either side and each section of that coliseum, that chrono ball, but it looked like a coliseum, was on like a film tape that's being projected outwards, which is why it looked like that. Like I can appreciate that, but it's still in terms of interconnected universes, aka a multiverse, in terms of how that works or why it's being interpreted, it looked really bad. Why was it that every single time Barry was in the chronosphere, the floor was sand? Was it because sands of time? It's another metaphor. It's just but Barry has nothing to do with the beach. He's not a he's not a marine biologist. He's not a beach guy. It just
I think
it a
that's
lot
like
of
the
these things were very forced.
I think it's just that's an arbitrary aesthetic choice. I don't think it
Yeah.
has to mean anything. Like that's not something that bothers
No,
me.
true, but it just like it's about establishing rules. It's about establishing how things function and work, and everything, literally everything about the chronosphere has no rules. It doesn't establish anything. It just is.
Well,
And for
that's
me,
not
that
necessarily
frustrates me.
true. I actually okay, so I'll get back into why I really
Okay.
hate this scene from a story perspective in a minute, but I'll
Mhm.
actually give it that I really like the way that the Chrono Bowl functions, like physically, which is that it's like a treadmill, and as you run on it, you're like rewinding through days and then weeks and then months and then years. So I really like the first time that we see it and like the visual of he's looking back and he sees like Diana and Bruce staring down at him from earlier in the day. And as he runs forward, he runs to earlier scenes that we've already seen. And I just like the way that that's portrayed. The CGI itself is still gross and ugly, and I don't care for it, but I like the visual concept of this thing.
Mhm.
But the problem with all the cameos from the perspective of the story is that if we're talking about Barry's central flaw as a character and it's his obsessive need to fix everything, then I think Dark Flash is really, really effective as a quote unquote villain because it's really just actually horrifying and sad that, like, especially that it happens to younger Barry, who was this more innocent guy who had like a pretty happy life, and now suddenly he can't let go of his need to fix this problem, and it's literally turned him into a monster. And it's like he's deteriorated himself. He's gotten stabbed multiple times. He's barely recognizable as a human being anymore, and it didn't have to be this way. He just couldn't let it go. And it really sucks. And it's a genuine bit of a tragedy that I think is actually really effective. And I get, like, Brianna explained to me, like, for like the mechanics of the way that the Chrono Bowl thing works, it couldn't happen this way. But I really like the choice. I don't know if it was a script or directing choice that, like, younger Barry and Barry Prime are having a conversation. Younger Barry, like, you can see that he's getting kind of frazzled and kind of like, oh, what's going on here? and the tension is just there in their conversation. He's like, give me one more chance, I can do it. He leaves. The instant he leaves, Dark Flash comes back, and you just have this instant like bell ringing in your brain of like, oh shit, like this is really bad. Like I think that that's a really effective choice and a really well done scene. And then like if we just kept it with three berries there having a conversation about just how horrible things had gotten because of their choices, this really could have been an all-time like climax in a superhero movie for me. And then the cameos start happening, and this is the first bullet in the foot, where it's like you had a great scene going here. This could have been the peak of this movie from a storytelling perspective for me. And then you decide to stop telling story for like 2 solid minutes of just gross cameos. What were you thinking? Like you've completely killed the movie because this is the most pivotal scene. Like people could argue it's the scene afterward where he goes and talks to his mom one last time, but this is the impetus for that. This is our protagonist learning his lesson, interrogating himself, literally interrogating his main character flaw, seeing his flaw externalized as a physical force and confronting it. And we can't focus on that for like 5 minutes without devolving into meaningless cameos. You've ruined the whole movie, basically. Why would you do this to yourself?
And it's because, yeah, and it's again, I think it just goes back to not understanding. Like, you've got all the fluff and all the sprinkles figured out, but the ice cream and the cake is just a mess because you don't know what you want to do with it. Because if we're really going to sit here and pretend this movie has an antagonist, who is it? If we're going to pretend it's the Dark Flash, he's only on screen for maybe 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes at most, and then he's swiftly defeated.
And see, I like the idea that he's not even an antagonist. Like, Barry's antagonist is his own fixations, and Dark Flash is just those fixations made manifest. And, like, there's still a lot to talk about for why this doesn't work, so we'll get to Zod in a minute,
Mhm.
but Zod's definitely not the antagonist of this movie. I would debate that it doesn't necessarily need one, but if you're going to do that, you have to still just let the scene play.
Yeah, exactly. Like, when it comes to storytelling, you definitely need an antagonist, but antagonist doesn't always have to be a person. It could also be the struggle itself. So I do agree, writing in and focusing on Barry's struggle to not let things go and let things be is in itself an antagonist. Like WandaVision, Wanda was both the protagonist and the antagonist at the same time. It's all about how you write it. It was just, I think it was poorly written because then you force Dark Flash into the into the film and try to kind of allude, because they never really do. They never really establish that he's the villain, but they allude to him being the main overarching villain. And I'm the reason why you didn't go back in the timeline you really needed to, and X, Y, and the other. And like he pops out of the chronosphere. And again, in terms of how the chronosphere works, he really just is like, it's the equivalent of sitting behind the bleachers and waiting for the right moment to jump out and then attack him. Like, where were you hiding this entire time? But okay, whatever. Pushes him out, and then we don't see Dark Flash at all. And I realized, the moment I realized, oh, younger Barry's Dark Flash is this, like right after he got the first spike in his arm, and when they both got on the chronosphere, I was like, oh, okay, I see he's about to leave. He's gonna get more, and then eventually he's gonna become Dark Flash. So I pretty much saw it coming before the big reveal.
I
But they're
had
really,
that too because I'd been looking at the design of Dark Flash, like
yeah.
because he's in the toy. But Brianna's great to watch movies with because she's my window into what people who don't spend so much time online and like looking at the marketing of these things will react to. And she had like a good 30 seconds when Dark Flash shows up at the end where she's like, who the fuck is this guy? And then she sees like the really prominent like spike thing that he has on his arm, and she's like, oh no.
Yeah, and here's the funny thing about that too, in terms of CGI. I think the Dark Flash, in terms of like VFX, looks really, really good. If anything, they spent a lot of time on the VFX on him and none of that time on anything else. On most of the other things, especially the Chronosphere, which I thought was jarring. Like, why does Dark Flash look really good and everything else looks really bad? While they're in the same environment. Not even, oh, this scene looks bad compared to this scene. No, it's the foreground looks good, the background looks terrible.
My
I thought that was very
assumption would be
interesting.
that that's mostly costume and not CG.
I don't really know. I haven't seen a behind the scenes with Dark Flash, so I can't really say. But it's definitely CG enhanced.
Also, this is just snuck up on me how long we've been here. I do have a place to be, so I'm going to say
Okay.
let's try and cut this off within the next 30 minutes.
How does that sound to you, Malik?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay. So, is there anything else to say about this scene specifically? Because there's two places we could move from after that.
Well, I think this, since we're already in talking a bunch about the third act, I would like to get into Supergirl because she was one of the things that I was most excited about coming into this movie, and it feels like the Henry Cavill thing, but infinitely worse. Because while I maintained, even when Man of Steel first came out, that like Henry Cavill's perfect casting, he just was not given a remotely good script, like at all. We have kind of the same issue here, but Sasha's given literally nothing, like nothing at all. And I'm just like, this is so sad and weird because like I'm watching her try to, and she's lifting up the press tour for this movie, like practically all by herself.
The irony.
She's got to sell this movie as if she was the lead when she's playing this non-character.
Yeah, she's like out of all the characters in the film that like we see throughout it. That's not like from the beginning in the first half that's left behind because of the time travel stick. No, it's just like the main ensemble. She plays the least important role. She's on the screen time like the least amount, and she's carrying the press tour, which is really, really funny.
But yeah, like I know David disagrees with me, but I dig her suit. I like her look. I like her energy. I think there was she just wasn't given the opportunity, but I think she could have really, really crushed this role if she had a good script behind her. And so that's really unfortunate, especially because she's like, as much pontificating as we do about representation and like not fridging women and yada yada yada, she's unceremoniously, well, not unceremoniously, but murdered multiple times. And then
and you could argue it's fridging because it's all about then motivating Barrymore.
Yeah, but like there's not even like a real like we don't get like a closure, like resolution scene with her. She and previous Batman are just kind of dropped, like left in that timeline, and we quote unquote resolve things with Clooney, which was funny enough, the only thing, Nick, I shit you not, of all the ridiculous fan service in this movie, that was the thing that got the most applause and the most laughs.
I believe that. That happened also with both of my viewings. Like with the first viewing, they were just cheering at every fucking thing, but in the second viewing, nobody cheered until Clooney showed up.
Yeah, it's just so as Malik mentioned, I like casting her. I don't know her. I'm not familiar with her work, so like I'm indifferent. I don't see her as Supergirl. I wasn't a fan of the suit. And her role in the film, I don't fault her for it because it really is about direction and script and what you have available at your disposal. So I don't fault her for that. I wouldn't have casted her personally. I don't like the design of the suit, but it's again, it is subjective. It's neither here nor there. It just kind of is. But at the like we've already touched on the fact that she plays no real role. Like she does no character development. Any character development she would have had is kind of, oh well, I just changed my mind and now I'm helping you guys. And it also kind of almost defeats the purpose of time traveling in the first place because Ben Affleck's initial Barry warning, the Barry don't time travel because you don't know what could happen, is like, okay, but we know when you time travel things change, at least science fiction, but with thematic, like time travel change. But whenever, like when it came to the Kryptonian battle and her dying, it was, you could keep time traveling but nothing's going to change, which is now you have to give up. That was really odd to me because it's like, okay, so you can go back in time, try to save your mom, do it on the wrong way, very weird. But okay, try to save your mom. You don't introduce Reverse Flash at all. Another thing that I don't know if many people noticed, Joe West doesn't seem to exist in this universe, or if he does, he has no relevance or bearing. So Barry was kind of an orphan. We don't really know how he grew up or where he grew up, just that he did. Um, so whatever. And then like, okay, so you can go back in time and try to change those things, but whenever you try to go back in time and change the outcome of the battle and save Supergirl, you never do because time travel doesn't work that way. And then
Okay,
Dark
yeah.
Flash comes out and he's like, I've tried 500 times. So one more time. It's just like, wait, what?
This is also like you talk about rules and not properly establishing rules and how things work.
Yeah.
We talk
And
about inevitable intersections, like that's this movie's equivalent to canon events. And when you really stop and think about it, I'm just like, wait, what even is an inevitable intersection? Because when Bruce and Barry talk about it, over the screen in the
spaghetti.
Batcave, the example that they use is that every Bruce Wayne has an Alfred. So that creates like an expectation in your head as to what this concept means.
Hmm.
Like it's just a thing that happens always across different universes. But then we get to the ending and Barry's like, oh no, this is an inevitable intersection. This world specifically has to die at Zod's hands. Like, but that's this one universe. Like the way that you talked about inevitable intersections earlier, it made it seem like these are things that happen in every universe. Now it's just something that has to happen in this one universe.
Yeah.
Like, what are you
So
talking about?
not talking about how the spaghetti, like I like that they tried to explain why Ben Affleck changed to an older, significantly older Michael Keaton Batman. Oh,
Yeah, the
because
idea of like time traveling affects things backwards and forwards is a good idea.
like I like the idea, but I just don't think it actually really works practically or within the film itself. But then you go and you're like, okay, so because here's the thing. In Marvel Comics, Marvel's multiverse works one way. DC's multiverse works a different way. Now they have similarities, but we understand that within the comics, the how the multiverse universe parallel universes are created and how they function in relation to each other don't actually do the same exact thing. And in recent years with Doomsday Clock and or leading up to that and they actually went and revisited the Flashpoint universe with Thomas Wayne Batman. It's like, well, this universe shouldn't exist because Barry going back in time, changing things, didn't create a new multiverse or not multiverse, but new universe. It was affecting the same timeline that needed to go back and fix it. It was still the same timeline, and from there, and also because of the Prime Earth Zero, it ended up creating the New 52. Um, so again, having rules, establishing those rules, and what those exceptions to those rules are. And this movie is like, okay, well, here's the multiverse. You traveled back in time, but you didn't really travel back in time. You also traveled to a different universe. Okay, so that's already separating from the comics, and that's not a bad thing. But okay, you're already separate from comics. Then you explained it away with spaghetti, and then so you set the rules, and then you kept undermining those rules when it came to younger Barry trying to go back in time and fix things. Because now is he going? So how come he didn't, when he was traveling back in time, he wasn't hopping to another universe just like this one where she lives? So which one is it? Are you traveling to different universes? Is it the same universe but different, but you effectively change the timeline? So, but it can't be. You have to go to a different universe because you have an older Batman, which means he was born significantly, way before you were born. So it really is a different universe. But then can't you do the same thing for Supergirl? It's like, which one is it? Abandon this universe, like you abandoned the universe where your mom died, and go to the universe where she lives. It's like, oh, well, it doesn't work that way. Then how
So
does it work? It's arbitrary.
this is where we come to the other bullet in the foot,
Mm-hmm.
because time travel is tricky,
It's
and
bullshit.
especially with the rules that, like the Back to the Future type rules that we often see time travel operate with, it's very tricky to maintain character sympathy if the time travel is not an accident. So in Back to the Future, Marty McFly ends up in the past by like no conscious decision of his own and is stuck there. He has to act, he has to change things as a matter of getting back to the time that he's supposed to be. And that's often what we do with time travel. I'm
Mm-hmm.
stuck in the past, or I'm stuck in the future. Yes, my actions are going to affect things, but I have to act because I'm in a situation where if I don't, I'm stuck or I'll die or something. And when we've got a story like Flashpoint, then you could easily have something like the CW Flash show, where I dropped that show at the end of season 2 because I just couldn't sympathize with Barry Allen anymore. He consciously made the decision to go back in time and change things, knowing that it would affect other people's lives, and he took that decision completely out of their hands because he was feeling sad, and that completely destroyed my ability to relate to, care about, sympathize with him as a main character. So I just was not able to engage with that show after that point. Once you do what this movie does, and you introduce the concept that changing things in the past won't just change things in the present, but risk changing things further back in the past, then you have steroided that problem to unmanageable levels, because Barry got lucky that in saving his mom, he happened to create an alternate world that gets destroyed in 2013, or where Bruce Wayne was born a few years earlier. Like with the rules that you've set up, movie, any small change, like literally anything, could actually destroy the world. Barry could accidentally create a version of Earth where human beings just don't exist because he changed the past and the future. And okay, if you don't want to talk about those implications, fine. Barry's going to go back and he's going to save his mom and he's going to put everything right so we don't really have to think about it. But oops, he decides to change the placement of the tomato cans so that his dad shows up on the security camera. So he learned nothing then. So if Barry came back and anything more significant than who's playing Bruce Wayne had changed, that would have been all his fault. People could have never been born who were born before. Horrible, horrible things could have happened because Barry decided to move some tomatoes. That's what happened the first time. He doesn't know that doing it again won't make things happen worse, but he decides to move an entire bunch of tomatoes up to the top shelf because he can. And the movie does not seem to realize or care how badly that damages his character and the themes and just the entire story.
It's a complete contradiction. And like the butterfly effect perfectly kind of tries to encapsulate what happens if you were to go back in time, because we don't actually know. But what this movie seems to do with the rules it establishes and constantly breaks and undermines is not only is the do we have like the butterfly effect, but it's like take it to the nth degree where I don't even have to step on a butterfly and someone doesn't get born. I could literally go back in the past, just be in the past, and now human evolution never got past Neanderthals.
Literally anything could happen.
Yeah,
Literally
because it's
anything.
their rules are we will set up our rules arbitrarily, only to break them arbitrarily. It's so dumb. It doesn't. Yeah, like
And like
regardless.
normally,
Yeah,
like Malik can tell you this. Normally, I'm not a stickler for like adhering to plot rules if you can sacrifice them for the sake of like a cathartic emotional beat, if the emotional beat works. And like for a second, when you don't think about it, it's like, okay, Barry's got his dad acquitted. Fine, cool. The whole movie can't just be, I mean, it can just be a big downer where Barry learned a lesson and then moves forward with that knowledge, but clearly that's not what it wants to do. It wants to give him at least somewhat of a win. Fine, whatever. But then you think about it, it's just the problem isn't even that it's contradicting plot stuff, it's that it makes Barry such a selfish, narrow-minded person who didn't learn anything from this experience. That's the real problem.
which is so upsetting because the entire premise of the Flashpoint comic, the Flashpoint concept, was it was out of selfishness. It was saying that, but it was also a lot deeper than that. It's one thing to say I actually have the power to go back, like I have the ability to save people in a blink of an eye, so I have that responsibility. But actually, I actually also have the power to go back in time and prevent other people's deaths. I could actually go back in time and save my own mother's death. So even though there was like he put his responsibility to his current friends and current family and everything he's gone through, pushed that aside for a selfish desire, ruined things to such a degree to where it was so bad, he had to go back in time, learn his lesson, go back in time, stop himself, and that didn't fully fix everything. But it was to a point where I will never do this again because it is unfathomable of the kind of damage that it could create on a universal, on a multiversal scale. And I'm almost to a point I'm afraid of my own power. And it's the less it's not just, oh, he learned his lesson. It's holy, like I don't even think about doing it because it's really really that bad. Like friends and relationships like still kind of happen after post New 52, but it's just like you never know how it's going to form or how it's going to happen, and it is really really bad. And
More than any other
yeah,
time travel story, the lesson from this movie should be never even come close to attempting time travel again.
they don't even hit the ball there. Like, yeah, you can say that that should be the lesson, but I don't even know what the lesson of this movie is. Don't hire Ezra Miller? I don't know. I don't know what the lesson is. Fire all the screenwriters. Like again, because Joe West doesn't exist. So again, like we don't have the Reverse Flash. So look at Barry real quick. Look at Barry Allen as a character. His entire reasoning for becoming a not just a interest in the sciences, it's a forensic scientist. Is specifically not just to I hope the lawyer, like in this movie, I hope the lawyers exonerate my father. It's nothing to do with that. It's because he witnessed a flash of light, a yellow blur kill his mom in front of his father. His father can rationalize because he's older. He's been in prison for however many years. He rationalized it like I don't really know what I saw, and I sound crazy anyways. It doesn't matter. Barry, just move on with your life. And we kind of got a glimpse of that in Justice League, the first Justice League, when Barry first went to visit his father, which was a different actor, but whatever. In the prison cell, like I'm in prison, but you still have your whole life ahead of you. I don't even know how to explain the nights, but the event that happened, but whatever. In this movie, we see there was no Flash. There was a flash of light. Reverse Flash does not even apparently seem to exist in this universe. Has nothing, no involvement in the death of his mother. And it's like not only does so Barry seems to, for whatever reason, become a forensic scientist anyways. For what purpose? It just happens because that's Barry. Barry becomes a
That's
forensic
another
scientist.
thing I don't agree with. This is where I'll take up for the movie again, because I think they make it pretty clear that even without Reverse Flash, the reason that he's a forensic scientist is that like what happened with his mom and his dad disillusioned him to the justice system. He feels like the system lets people down. Like when he's talking to his two coworkers who are like his roommates in the other universe,
Mhm.
like, Barry, why are you so slow with like processing evidence? Where he's like, if we're not careful about this, then real people, innocent lives will be ruined by us and our like lack of care and our screw ups. And that's another thing of like how he like needs to fix everything. His boss is saying like your career has stalled out because you're so obsessed with finding the perfect fix that you're not actually getting anything done. You're too worried about making a mistake that you're not like processing what needs to be processed. And so like I think that's a good character beat, and I think that works as a motivation. Like separate out from this being an adaptation of anything where we have the precedent of Reverse Flash. I think I wouldn't question why this Barry is in the field that he's in. I feel like the movie explains it.
Why wasn't he a lawyer?
Yeah.
It would have been a lot easier to exonerate your father if you were a lawyer. Because
Maybe he just likes science.
That liking science is not a good enough of a motivation to try and like get into the field. His entire purpose in as even in the film, taking it outside of the fact that it's an adaptation and which has a lot better reasonings and motivations for him doing anything. Outside of that, if he was a lawyer, because all lawyers do is interpret and twist the law, because it's all like, that's their jobs, is to twist and interpret the laws to benefit their client. If he was a lawyer, it doesn't matter if the evidence was misprocessed or not. He could have just said, oh, well, we don't know who the killer is, and it's clearly not the dad because his fingerprints aren't on the knife. End of discussion. It's just his job. His dad probably in that universe. His dad probably would have been exonerated years prior if he was just a lawyer.
So my, I haven't fully thought through this yet. But just hearing you guys talk, I'm thinking I might be somewhere in the middle on this. But I do definitely despise not having Reverse Flash in this movie. Not Adam Driver, Andy Muschietti
More.
talked in an interview about how like if they do a sequel, Reverse Flash will be introduced there, and it is still in fact Reverse Flash that is killing his mother. But I talked to David about this when we finished the movie. That's so dumb because for anyone like Brianna or like your coverage, your average layman who's not in the know, like who is killing his mother? Like,
and if it's Reverse Flash, he's not gonna come in and do it because Henry Allen is still in the house.
Yeah, like someone who has no ability to stop him whatsoever. Like is just, oh no, this average dad that I can kill in less than a millisecond is here. Like it doesn't make sense. There was no reason to separate Barry from witnessing the event of seeing his mother die. Like they stick him up in his bedroom while that whole thing is going on, and we never actually see who is killing his mother. So it just looks like either A, the dad did it, or B, she did it to herself. The movie never tells us who is doing this to her.
Well, we know it can't be Henry because we hear her scream when he's outside the house.
Oh, that doesn't matter. That's the crazy thing. As an audience member, we know this. But in terms of why he's imprisoned and why he's, in prison for this long, they don't care. They don't know that. It's hearsay. They don't have the evidence for it. And that's the crazy thing too. And I was talking to Malik about this, and just like as a standalone film outside of it being a comic book adaptation, there are liberties you can take for sure. But with a character like Barry Allen and taking up the job as a forensic scientist specifically, and his motivations for why he doesn't really have a lot of friends or why he's so invested in his work and attention to detail and stuff like that, like I think it's so much smarter to pull from the comics because the comics just establishes it so well. He witnesses an event he cannot explain. His father, the adults can't. It's so unbelievable. They think they're a little bit crazy. So he becomes a forensic scientist because one, it's in part law, So he has some control over providing evidence to free and exonerate his dad. And two, within the sciences enough to where he can try to educate himself and explain the unexplainable. How did my mom get murdered by something no one can explain? And three, it's also in part again bringing marrying those two things together, which is I can go back, look at the evidence from the crime scene, understand what has been collected, what probably was neglected, what evidence is missing to explain these events. And as a forensic scientist who frequently on my job goes to crime scenes and figure these things out on a Sherlock Holmes kind of level, like they did this very well in the first episode of The Flash. And then they forgot about it for the rest of the season, the show running. But it explained why is he a forensic scientist? Why is he so motivated to exonerate his dad? Why is he so smart and dedicated to his job? Why he loves the sciences? Like all of that marriages itself so well together, and they all play into each other. And the fact that you eliminated Barry from witnessing the murder, eliminated the Reverse Flash, a phenomenon no one can explain, has never seen before, because this predates metahumans, and then like leaves Joe West out of it entirely, because Joe West is a very good mentor and motivator, and also helps bring Barry in because they work in the same precinct, brings Barry into the criminal investigation side of things. You eliminate all those things, and just Barry just so happens to be a weirdo because I don't like the interpretation that he's weird, but fine. Errol has
he is.
He's a hopeful character in the comics, and he's friendly, and he's comedic relief for sure, but he's not a weirdo. He's not antisocial.
I thought we were talking about the movie.
In the movie, he is, but it's just like, fine. I don't care for that interpretation, but okay, fine. In the movie, he is, but then it's like it's just all of these things happen because Barry Allen is supposed to be in this job, and he's supposed to try and exonerate his dad. And then again, it undermines the death of his mom. Like he cares so deeply about his mom, and he loves her so much, and they keep painting us in both bad ways and in really, really good ways, like at the end of the film. But they do it so poorly because it's like, I'm going to go back in time to save her by not stopping the murderer. Figuring out who the murderer is, I'm just going to move a can of sauce. And then do it again the second time by moving the can of sauce, putting it back, but changing the shelves. So still change the timeline, but whatever. And still not find out who the goddamn murderer is. And then you're like, oh, well, we'll introduce Reverse Flash in the sequel. There won't be a sequel. No. That's so dumb. It really, like, everything that motivates Barry to even care about, like, his reasons for caring about his mom don't make sense. Because it's just like, are you going to save her life or not? It's just like, because here's what could have happened. She never could have left the house. The murderer could have still killed her.
Yeah.
Just because it happened in broad daylight and the dad was, no offense to the actor who played, but I'm not looking at him and saying, "Ooh, I don't want to fight that guy." It's like, you have a knife and you just have this guy with his son. Like, I'm stabbing them and then I'm killing the mom. It's like, okay.
I'd forgotten to bring this up, but we've been talking about all the time travel and like the effects that would have. It's super weird that we've got two Barrys time traveling all throughout the fight with the Kryptonians, and that doesn't seem to affect anything.
They just that's just because paradoxes? Just ignore it.
Yeah. We established, like, going back to any point can change the past as well as the future. They go back like a good 2 minutes multiple times, and it seems like nothing about anything has changed.
Actually, I love that you mentioned that, because one of the things I had problem wrapping my head around was in the original Flashpoint story, there's never two Barrys. Barry goes back, stops Reverse Flash from killing his mom. Next thing he knows, he's waking up in the crime lab. He's like, what happened? He doesn't realize he changed time. He doesn't realize what happened. He actually doesn't have his powers, and he figures this out late. He meets up with his mom, and it's like, oh shit, wait, hold on. It worked. I remember now, it worked. But he doesn't realize that time itself has been changing, and later learns to do, and this is why he has to go and get his powers back. This movie establishes it's not, because in that story, it's the same timeline. He never gets his powers. Never gets hit by lightning, or it's whatever, because his mom never died. So it's still him. It's the same guy, but his memory, he remembers a timeline that doesn't actually exist. And that's the motivation for the movies. While in this movie, he travels to a different universe. So technically, his universe where Henry Cavill is still Superman still exists somewhere. He just never made it back.
I don't know how true that is. I think
there are two Barrys. He didn't change the timeline. He just hopped to a timeline where his mom didn't die.
Well,
I don't think that's what the movie establishes. It's not.
Well, the movie doesn't really know what it wants to establish.
Barry, it's one Barry from 2023 and one Barry from 2013. Both occupying space in 2013. Yeah, no, the movie definitely establishes that Barry has made changes to his universe, not entered a different one.
So
I don't believe that, only because every rule they try to establish they break.
So when he goes back, and we're in the third act, and they keep restarting time so they can attempt to save Keaton's Batman and Supergirl. I get what you're saying in that since he's already went back in time before, and there's now a duplicate of himself, why doesn't that keep happening? Why is it just them showing up back in the time that they started for that fight, as opposed to them literally duplicating themselves in the timeline like he did the first time? But instead, it's conveniently just the two of them.
Actually, now that you've laid it out like that, Malik, I think it makes perfect sense. Well, actually, no, it doesn't. Dang it! I mentally talked myself out, because what I was gonna say was it would make sense that let's say it's like right now it's 2:14. Let's say they're fighting the Kryptonians at 2:14, and then Supergirl and Batman both die, and it's 2:16. So they decide, both the two Barrys collectively leave to go back to 2:14. They would not run into themselves because they have just left. But no, there would still be that 2-minute gap where there would now be 4 Barrys running around the same place.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a very, and this is the inherent problem with time travel. It is really about interpretation. But my explanation goes into they establishing rules and then contradicting those rules. Because here's the thing. It could be a time travel story, just like Back to the Future, except let's assume he didn't see his dad. He met a younger version of himself. It's the same timeline. You're just going further back.
Back to the Future Part 2.
Exactly. So we can do that, or we could go with the explanation that because it could be either one. Because just because they said this is how it is, we have seen numerous examples in this one film alone that we're just going to ignore what we just established. We're going to say it's the same universe, and then we're going to say no, it's not. Because here's what we actually end up seeing. We see Barry goes back in time, changes things, tries to go back, reverse. Dark Flash kicks him out much earlier than he wanted to. He meets a younger version of himself. I could argue that he kicks him into a separate parallel universe where his mother actually is alive, and there's still his main universe where his mother is still dead. So there's 2 Barrys, but it's 2 different universes. And then further in the film, when they try to time travel again, the reason why they're not encountering 2 other Barrys is because when they go back in time, they actually go back to where they were before those events happened. They were kind of reversing tracing back their own steps in reverse. They're going backwards, which is why there aren't 4 of them, because it's within the same timeline, not identical timelines, but it's a parallel world where now there are 4 of them. That's just what we see. But let's just be honest, regardless of how you want to spin it, nothing in terms of how this shit works makes sense. Because we could all say this all still takes place within a singular timeline. So why aren't there 16 different or 500 different Barrys?
Jeez.
It doesn't make sense however you want to spin it, because they've tried to establish rules that they don't want to be consistent with.
We've got 10 minutes left, and it really just makes the point that we were going to make already, that we have not actually talked about Zod at all beyond passing mention.
Well, let's be honest. There's nothing really to discuss about Zod. He plays the same exact role he plays, plot-wise, that he plays in Man of Steel, but it's adapted because, well, we actually did get Kal-El, but he died as a baby. but it's actually you, Kara, because we needed a woman in this one.
Which then I
And
think,
that's it. He does. There's no character development. He doesn't serve any other purpose. It's just to rehash Man of Steel. There's
which I
nothing really
think
to discuss.
then like raises the question of why rehash Man of Steel? Like, I want to be a fly on the wall when that decision was made.
Mhm.
Like, why go back to 2013 specifically? Why make this a full circle bookend things with Man of Steel? Was that something we decided to do
I think
before or after we realized that the universe was basically going to end with this movie? Is
It
it
could be
because it's
another.
been 10 years?
Yeah, it could be another instance of hitting us over the head that this is ending. Like, hey, this is where we started, and now we're gone.
well,
It
yeah,
could be that.
say like that's the obvious go-to
Yeah.
is like to pretend like this is a cohesive universe and narrative in the same way that the first three phases of the MCU were.
Yeah.
Like we're calling back to where it all started, and you know.
This could be. This also could just be taking inspiration from the Flash TV show, where they're only when he goes back in time and does Flashpoint. It only really like it's all about what we've seen and what we witnessed in the show itself. I
Yeah.
like, from my knowledge, I like Malik. You started this podcast by saying Flashpoint storyline has been overdone. I don't agree with that because we've only seen it 3 times. And outside of the comics, we've only seen it adapted 3 times. The first time was Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox animated movie. Even though that's a simplified version of the comics, it's really really good. The second time was the Flash TV show, which was abysmal. And then there's this movie. Every time they've tried to adapt the Flashpoint Paradox, it's always a dumbed down mess. And it's because they really don't try to they either don't try to build up to a Justice League and a like Marvel-esque expansive universe to then pull off Flashpoint with all these characters, to have the Amazonian Atlantean War. Like, they don't even bother with that. Where's Cyborg working with the US government? Like, they don't try to do any of that because, well, we didn't establish it. So it's just like, well, you're doing Flashpoint. First of all, you're doing, for this movie specifically, you're adapting a Flashpoint storyline. And we know this is pretty much the after Aquaman, but who really cares? Like, this is the definitive end of the Snyderverse and the current DCEU. Who cares? Bring everybody back. Make Aquaman and Gal Gadot, like Jason Momoa and Gal Gadot, fucking kill each other. Like, who cares at this point? It doesn't matter. You don't have to build up to it because no one cares anymore. Like, it doesn't mean anything.
Jeez.
They could have just done that. But I understand, because logically, like, stay within your universe. I don't disagree with that. But then don't do Flashpoint, because every single time they do it a massive disservice. Massive.
And it's just, one, I don't know. I don't disagree with Malik that Flashpoint has been overdone, but I wonder if the issue is less that it's been done too much and more that it's the only major Flash storyline that most people know, and it feels like it's overexposed.
I agree with you there. Not that I don't agree that it's been overdone, but I think that, look, we are like on a 3-year journey just for this one film. We knew from the get-go it was going to be a Flashpoint adaptation. So it does feel like Flashpoint. Oh, the Flashpoint. And
Yeah,
it felt like that
honestly,
for 3 years. So
you say 3 years. I honestly feel like it's more like 7. I feel like
it
as
really
as
really
soon
does
as
feel like
BVS
that.
came out,
Yeah.
and people didn't like it, a lot of fan discussion was, is the Flash movie going to be Flashpoint so that WB can like pull a Days of Future Past and diegetically make up for the bad movies?
Yeah.
Like, that discussion was happening very early.
Yeah.
Yeah, back then. But it doesn't even have, they don't even give themselves the same out as Days of Future Past, which is really fucking weird because I don't know if it was James Gunn directly, but there was talk that this movie was going to be a clean reset for Gunn to do like a rebooted DC universe. And
then
like,
it wasn't.
Yeah, and then it wasn't. Like,
Yeah.
because the ending is just a joke and doesn't properly like reset much of anything. This It's not really a clean reset. And we know whoever they're going to cast for Batman and Brave of the Bold, it's not going to be fucking Clooney. So this
And
has
two, the issue Zod is just that it's so bizarre how little of a character he is, because the entire plot pivots on him once we get to 2013. Like, he's the driving force behind the entire second act. And somehow, despite the fact that he comes up in dialogue constantly, I keep forgetting that he's in the movie.
Yeah, because he really is just a plot point.
the actor kept forgetting that he was in the movie. Like,
Yeah, it really is a shame.
He looks so miserable. Michael Shannon looks so miserable.
Yeah, he looks utterly miserable. Like, okay, like,
And like Fiora is barely there too. Like we saw in Man of Steel what a badass she was, and then in this movie she just like kind of dies. She's there and then kicked off to the side. And can we just discuss, like, really just not discuss? We don't need to, but like just acknowledge how laughable it is to have speedsters fight Kryptonians.
Anna, you say that, but Barry just straight up murdered one of them.
That's so. Well, first of all, it's so dumb because how do they have weapons that just pierce Kryptonian skin under the red sun, the yellow sun? That's just weird. And then
no. I'm talking about the him like vibrating his hand and stuffing it in that guy's chest.
Yeah.
Why don't you just do that to all of them?
They could have, but like they're heroes. That's not the expectation. And then you notice they do that the one time, and then they never do it again throughout the fight.
And they never acknowledge it.
They don't acknowledge. They look at each other, and it's like, okay, moving on. It's so weird. It really is so bizarre. And again, like, oh, don't worry, Kryptonians are fast, but they're not as fast as us. And you expect to push them? What are you gonna do? It's so like none of having a speedster fight. I don't care if you have all the speedsters. Get the Flash family. Like, you're not gonna be able to do anything against a Kryptonian. You're just not. Maybe vibrate your molecules to affect their organs, but their organs are just as strong as their skin. So whatever you're phasing through to try and mangle or twist their organs, it's not going to work. Because in order, like, the logic behind phasing through things is you're vibrating your molecules fast enough to pass through solid objects, whether that's organs or tissue or stone. But in order to interact with those, you have to very lightly and very strategically re-solidify your hand or your fingertips to grasp them and then twist or do whatever you want to do with their organs.
So how are you going to phase through the chest but also affect the heart?
You can't, because their heart are it's just as impervious as the skin above. It's not Luke Cage, where it's just the epidermis of his skin is strong, but the inside of his body isn't. The Kryptonians are strong inside and out. Superman Returns proved that with the bullet hitting him in the eyeball. Like, yeah, it doesn't matter where you shoot me. I could barely cut my own hair. I have to use laser vision to cut my hair because scissors won't even do it. So it's like, even Flash, like killing one of the Kryptonian drones, whatever you want to call them, like faceless army guys in a crowd, phasing through them doesn't make sense because you can't do that. Kryptonians don't work on that level. It's stupid. It's laughable.
This will be my last point, and then I'm going to give final thoughts, and you guys can continue or not if you want to. But on a similar level to Zod, as far as characters who like are clearly important to the plot of the movie and come up a whole bunch but don't really have a real presence, if I'm script doctoring this movie, I know that it would be a difficult thing to make work, but my first note would be find a way to put Nora in more of the movie, because once we get to 2013 and she's back, we get that one scene with her. It's like, oh, great, she's alive. And then the movie just kind of moves on, and Barry's relationship with his mom and the fact that one of them has her and the other one doesn't, still at the core of their dynamic, but it feels weird that she has zero screen time for most of the movie still.
I agree with you. And it goes back to my point earlier about his entire, like, they make such a huge point that he's obsessed and like he's traumatized by the death of his mom. but does absolutely nothing to actually directly save her. And then he goes back to 2013, meets her for a second, and then she kind of fucks off. She doesn't exist anymore. Like it's here in reference, like
Like, forget just him.
it still feels like she's dead.
We need more than just the most perfunctory scenes to establish why the audience should have a connection to her.
Yeah,
But
it's
she's
just like,
just the archetypal, like, sweet mom.
but she also becomes kind of a plot. Like she has a little bit more personality, but she becomes a plot point as well, because like they're in the Batcave discussing their differences. Oh, I didn't know your mom died, and that's why you're here. But like the mom's still alive in that universe. Like, don't you guys need to meet up with her and have dinner or something? Like, there's nothing. There's nothing. It's just like she's there for the entire movie. Supergirl dies. It's just like, oh, but our mom is still somewhere. Like they forget he saves her life and then treats her like she's dead for the rest of the movie until he goes back in time and makes sure she dies. it's
I
like,
don't know. This movie is a fascinating relic. I think it's ironic that, like, this is a bookends with Man of Steel, but like everything that has come out since 2016 in the DCU, this movie really exists as a response to Batman v Superman. And like Batman v Superman, it is the kind of thing that I think I'm going to enjoy, like, analyzing and picking apart and talking about for years to come. I still get that, like, high of just thinking about what a weird, bizarre little picture Batman v Superman is. And were it not for the fact that WB as a whole, not just DC, but Warner Brothers as a larger corporation, is already in such a tailspin, like, change, like metamorphosis. If it wasn't already in that position, like Batman v Superman, this would be the kind of movie that puts them in that position, because it's such a major misfire that they have staked so much on. And of the three of us, I've undoubtedly enjoyed it the most, and I've tried to advocate for it where I can in this discussion. But we've been going for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and for the most part, I can't argue with you guys on all the things that don't work about it. It doesn't work. It's a mess. It just does not function the way that a movie is supposed to, and especially not a movie that had this much riding on it. And I'll just end off by saying what I said at the start, which is that this movie has been, like, David, you say 3 years. Really, it's been more like 7 years, and that's being conservative, of trying to make this movie happen. This movie began production technically when the Flash TV show started. So, like, more like 9 years close to. And this feels every bit like a movie that has been broken and rebuilt and broken and rebuilt over and over again for 9 years. That's what's on the screen. And I'll say this for Andy Muschietti. We briefly mentioned, like, him making directorial choices that we don't agree with. Honestly, that he could get this movie over the finish line as anything that's remotely close to coherent is an accomplishment. Like, people want to look at this movie and say whether or not he should be attached to Brave and the Bold or whatever. I don't think anyone could have made a truly good movie out of this. I think the best that we could have hoped for is someone who could competently get it over the finish line. And if I were Andy Muschietti, I'd be proud that I'd accomplished that. Now, I have to go to a place for an appointment. So I'm going to let you guys give your final thoughts and say it's been great to speak to you both. David, you should absolutely be like a regular. You should totally talk with us when we do other stuff. And yes, I will hear what else you have to say when I listen back over to this. But for now, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a good day, Nick.
Have a good
one. Yeah, actually, you have to 100%, you have to give credit where credit is due. And regardless of my thoughts on the film, the fact that it even came out, um, in in the midst of the Warner Bros. Discovery merger, and the definitive official, like we knew for months, of the definitive end of the Snyderverse and the new frontier of the future of DC. Like, that is an accomplishment because they very easily, I would argue, they could very easily just done a Batgirl. Oh, we're in pre-production. We're in
That's
post-production. Tax write-off. We'll never see the light of day.
maybe I for me, I've never really took much stock in that argument just for the simple fact that like this is well over 4 times the budget of Batgirl, and
Hmm.
it's not even anywhere near the same ballpark in terms of just how much money they spent on production. Like forget marketing, just like production. Like this movie was insanely expensive to make.
Yeah.
Um,
But you also have
so
to remember that this is like an industry where, it's low risk, high reward. So if you have to keep putting money into it, they're either doing one of two things. They're doubling down and then doubling down and then doubling down again because it's a um sunk cost fallacy. Well, I've already spent money on it. So instead of just throwing it to the wayside, I should just spend even more money on it and keep and just kept doing that. Um, that's entirely possible because if Batgirl was just cheaper, might as well. That does make and again, they've been working on this movie for so many years and hyping it up. And they've already established Ezra Miller. We have no Batgirl anything in the Snyderverse. So just writing it off would have been easier, I suppose. Even though technically the movie was almost finished, they could have made some money off of it. Very disappointing. I didn't get to see Brandon Fraser in a superhero film, even as the villain Firefly.
yeah, I would agree. It sucks that that movie didn't get to come out. But part of me, uh, Warner Brothers is so wishy washy, and they were putting on their best Denzel Washington, selling crap out of this movie. Um, like and they having Tom Cruise be like, "This is one of the best superhero movies I've ever seen,"
I
and
thought that was so bizarre.
yeah, like having Tom Cruise go out of his way to endorse your film, and all the executives being like, "We're so proud of this movie," like you guys aren't ready, and like that just hammering it home and hammering it home so hard, and then for it to turn out the way it did. If they were so scared that Batgirl of all things was going to tank their reputation, part of me is kind of glad that they didn't even bother letting that be seen. Like if like their version of what supposed success is going to look like is the Flash, and they're scared of how people are going to react to Batgirl, then I'm like, wow, well, it must have been even way worse than this.
And that's a little bit weird to me too, because a lot of what's going on in every industry because of laws, is diversity hires. And Batgirl was 100% a diversity hire, and they would have gotten brownie points for that, I suppose. Personally, I wasn't hyped for the film. I didn't pay attention to its production. I didn't care. A lot of what I found out in terms of canceling it entirely, tax write-offs, and who was actually in it, I learned after the fact. I just wasn't in that sphere. I wasn't paying attention to it. I was paying attention to other things. Um, so yeah, it is very bizarre to say that we got the diversity, we've got a female lead, we got introducing whatever and all these things, and it costs significantly less to produce. Nah, we're gonna dump this and we're gonna focus on the Flash, where it doesn't do all those things with a lead with a criminal record, and he's hiding, playing GTA in real life. It's the decision making. You can really see that whatever decisions they're making, it's always the wrong one. Um, yeah.
They have their little golden nuggets here and there, like
Hmm.
with obviously with Gun Suicide Squad and the Peacemaker. Joker, the Batman, and hell, even the first Wonder Woman movie, despite how wonky that third act is handled, and
Yeah,
Aquaman as well. Like Aquaman
exactly.
was very much a beloved film and did ignorantly well. Like that's $1 billion film, and like nobody was seeing that coming.
Yeah, not even me. Yeah. But this
But the unfortunate thing though is much like Sony, for them it's there doesn't seem to be any real consistent methodology or planning behind that. It's just kind of luck of the draw. Where like our Spider-Verse films are doing gangbusters and we're letting creative people do really impressive and creative work. But then we're also uh letting shit like Morbius and Venom Let There Be Carnage get made.
And that's the fun. I love that you mentioned that because there's a methodology behind what's going on with the executives. Because with Warner Brothers Discovery, it does really seem like we're just going to do anything and greenlight anything and just see what hits or misses. We're not going to overview or check anything. And with Sony, it's we're going to have a plan and we're going to make these plans. The difference is, but like the funny thing is, when it's a bad plan and when we keep showing that it's not working, we're just going to keep doing it because that's our plan. Like, oh, Morbius was terrible. Oh, Venom 2 was terrible. So let's make Craven. Let's keep making villain movies. It's just stop. The plan isn't working. Don't do it.
Well, that's the thing though, David. You say the plan isn't working, but the dollar signs aren't necessarily showing that
Ah,
because
yeah.
even like Morbius didn't do well, but those two Venom movies did ignorantly well. Like I don't it kind of seeing how well Venom made crushed everything I understood about cinema. Like if you make a good movie, people are going to go and support it, and if you make a bad movie, no one's going to see. You can't even say that anymore
You can't.
because
You
like
really can't. No. It
how in the
really.
hell is Venom a damn near $1 billion movie?
Yeah. And it's just. It really is disappointing, and it's not necessarily something that's new, but it is something that has become more and more common. Where hey, let's just make bad movies because it doesn't have to be good anymore. People are going to see it. That's really, really disappointing. Um, yeah, because it's both in terms of like lack of competition, so they don't have to focus on good storytelling anymore. Um, but also because of lack of competition, you don't have to worry about whether or not someone's going to see something else because there is really nothing else. And because now only these few studios have all the screen time, all the airtime for all their advertisements, even if you wanted to advertise your movie with the smaller budget and that's not mainstream, good luck.
I will say I do really like the Barbenheimer craze right now.
It's hilariously good and it's so funny. The funniest thing I've ever seen. Yeah, I'm seeing so many like my favorite TV show is Doctor Who, and even they've hopped on this train. They had in London, they had the police box all in pink. And it was like, what is going on here? Everyone's hopping on this Barbie train. Yes, Barbenheimer is the meme, but it's mostly Barbie. And it's so funny to me. It's the funniest thing.
No, I'll have to wait and see the movie for myself. From all accounts,
Yeah.
it is largely kind of another feminazi fever dream movie. Um, but what I like so much about Barbie and Oppenheimer being as successful and kind of culturally on fire as they are right now is because it's giving light to something else other than the typical blockbuster, specifically superhero movies that have been keeping the lights on in theaters um, since COVID. And like because the message being sent to Hollywood is um, that no one's, as much as people are opining about not getting original stuff uh, online, it's not really showing in box office receipts. Like we get at least a dozen good original movies a year, but no one is seeing them.
Yeah, it's definitely an instance of actions speak louder than words, because they're like, we want authenticity, we want relatability, and then we're gonna throw our money where that's not present. It's like, oh, we like, and it's not just this extends far beyond theaters and movie making. This is, culture. It's like, we want authenticity. We want to see real people talk about grounded stuff that everyone could relate to, and then they go on TikTok or Instagram and they look at like those little influencers and those live videos, just like, what is this? Not what is this artificial, just fake everything. Like, you wanted something that's genuine, and you're getting the least genuine thing possible that's out there, and you're feeding into it. So what is it? What do you really want?
Yeah, so with movies like The
Mhm.
Flash, it feels like one of those like least common denominator formula films where it's like people are supposed to like uh the action, the jokes, and like that it's a superhero movie, so like we have all the ingredients you're supposed to have in the thing. We don't have to blend it or make it in a way uh that is at all coherent or interesting. It's just we've done our bit by including all these things in the first place. Um,
I think
and
that,
then
yeah, I think that was the biggest problem. I use, my example was sprinkles or fluff, but if we go with the ingredients, it's like they have all the ingredients, they just didn't know how to mix them.
exactly, and it blew up in their face.
Yeah,
Um, but with Oppenheimer, I mean that's biopics typically do just well enough to make their money back, depending on the figure that's being dramatized. But rarely, at least from what I see, did these films become like genuine cultural zeitgeist blockbusters. Um, and the fact that you have Oppenheimer just become that in less than a week is pretty impressive. Um,
yeah, and that, I think that's a really, really good thing, because it's not like, oh, here's a Elvis biopic, or here's a Jeffrey Dahmer series. It's, let's look at the father of the atomic bomb during the height of World War II, and it's science. It's, it's advocating for something everybody likes to cherry pick as long as it suits their goals and their needs, unfortunately, and an ever growing scientific illiterate populace and culture. And it's just like, it's it could just be, again, it could just be a star-studded cast, so they're advertising, they're going because, oh, Robert Downey Jr. is in it, Cillian Murphy's in it, and all these other people are in it.
and it's a
But
Nolan
it's
film.
but it's a Nolan film, and it looks really, really good. Um, and I'm really glad about that. But I am actually really appreciative that you did bring up the fact that the history of how well biopics usually end up being, because that does explain why Barbie, probably, well, not, maybe in part, but why Barbie is absolutely destroying Oppenheimer, Oppenheimer in the box office.
Yeah, it's a collection of things. It's
Yeah,
the obviously the IP. It's obviously squarely aimed at 20 somethings all the way up, really,
yeah.
women. And those women are going to drag their husbands, and maybe
Even
even their kids to this movie.
even more
Uh,
star-studded cast in Oppenheimer,
yep.
even way more.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Star-studded cast. The very culturally significant pop music from popular zeitgeist artists like Nicki Minaj and Cardi B and Ice and all these people.
and I think, like, collectively, despite all the Barbenheimer memes, Barbie has had the best advertising and marketing team, and like whatever they're doing. Like, I can't remember the last time it's been this culturally collectively good. Like,
It was
everyone's hyped and
insane.
everyone's talking about Barbie, and it's like, hire these people for every movie.
Like when me and Brianna and a friend of hers went to go and see Cobweb at an AMC theater, it was packed to the fucking brim with people that were clear, like visibly, you could tell they were, what movie they were going to see. They were going to see Barbie. Everyone was dressed in fucking pink,
Yeah.
and taking pictures in that giant like life size toy box that they have for audiences to come in and like take selfies,
Hmm.
to, like signify that they're at the movie, they're going to see the movie and promote the movie. Like it's just really really well done. Um, I really dig stuff like that. The kind of standees that you can go and take selfies with. They had stuff like that for Insidious, the Red Door,
Oh,
the new
yeah.
Insidious movie. Um, the Spider-Man standee for Spider-Verse, and stuff like that. I do get a kick out of stuff like that. That's pretty creative to me, and I enjoy when theaters will take the time to um, put stuff like that out and kind of like incentivize moviegoers to help them market the film.
Yeah, and it's not necessary, and that in itself, it is pretty rare though, unfortunately, because we have had video games where you're like, you go on this website and you have to figure out this mystery and collect things through several different teasers and figure it out. If I remember correctly, I think Man of Steel also had something like that, where it was the Zod trying to translate what Zod was, whatever message was in the kind of noise on the TV screen, and like trying to translate it yourself, leading up to the release of the movie. But I could be remembering that.
Yeah,
But it is
it's
very niche and few and far between. But
yeah.
Barbie has kind of taken that and it's like to a new extreme where like, oh, you're not phoning in or you're not texting this or not going on the website, but you're actively participating in this culture. That is, I don't know how they achieve that.
I think that they largely achieve that through Margot Robbie, because
100%.
I've been calling Margot Robbie the female Ryan Reynolds for a while now, and it's so applicable because no, she really really is, because
Yeah.
she's also taken on um, a major producer role in everything that she's in. Um, she's very very hands on with the script, the marketing, managing budget, like all of that stuff, and also is very very interactive on social media, and has a lot of creative ideas about marketing. And it's very very apparent. Like it's like she took the Ryan Reynolds playbook and has just been running with it. Like um, in the same way that you could argue that Harley Quinn has kind of become DC's Deadpool. Um,
You could definitely
she
see that they were trying to go that route with the Harley Quinn solo film with a name too long for me to bother remembering, which didn't
Birds
do
of
too
Prey.
well.
We can all just call it Birds of Prey.
Birds of Prey, its original name, yeah. But I think it's kind of a shame we might not see her as Harley Quinn again, just because she was really like it was kind of perfect casting with her.
It was perfect casting, and kind of rarely do you even see casting that perfect, where it was like the internet had already deemed this is who you guys should go with, and then
Yeah,
suddenly she had the role, and we were all like, whoa, wait, what? You actually listened to us?
yeah. Well, actually, that's funny because we got this a very similar thing with Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch. He was fan casted way before. I don't even. I think it was fan casted before the audition. But but yeah, it was just yeah. But I think now that we're talking about Barbie and Barbie, I think we kind of lost track of the topic of the Flash and the
Um,
direction of DC. But um, yeah, everything about that film was just, especially the ending too. Like everything about the ending is just, and I kind of knew, and I touched upon this with you before watching the film, because I was trying to speculate a couple of things just for fun. But I
mhm.
knew that the ending was going to be terrible. I knew something about the ending was going to be bad because if this movie, this canonically, because we don't know where Aquaman 2 takes place in universe. I think it's supposed to be prior to the Flash, but regardless, if the movie is supposed to end with the Flashpoint returning, trying to fix the timeline, by definition, we would see a newer Superman, a newer Batman, and a newer Flash because Ezra Miller is not coming back as a Flash in James Gunn's universe. So we would have to see like a face swap. And as like that's the only way you could conclude a Flashpoint story. And I knew that they weren't going to do it because they didn't actually have anyone cast yet. So I knew that they were going to fumble the bag on this, and they did. And they played it off with two jokes: George Clooney and Aquaman. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, so overall, not a great movie. Does not leave the DCEU in
I would
particularly.
argue it's an entertaining movie, but at best, but not a good movie at all, and definitely not a good comic book adaptation movie, and not a good Flash movie. And the Flash, let's be honest, the Flash isn't a protagonist. He's very good as a supporting character. I think the Flash TV show proved that, where his first season was like his strongest, and
I
then
really like
every
the first seasons.
yeah, I think a lot of people from what I read online is like should have ended at season 4, should have ended at season 5, or should have ended at season 2. But it definitely like 9 seasons of that show. It should have ended a long time ago.
Yeah, I could have like maybe restructure some things, add some things in, but yeah, I would. This
Yeah.
show should not have gone past season
It
3.
got so like it was really strong with the science and the explanations, and the suit was okay, but again, it's all prototypes and they're building world building. It was really, really smart and really well done and well scripted. The VFX were impeccable. And then it just kept dropping off. It just kept getting worse. And yeah, it was really, really bad in my opinion. Or at least it got really, really bad. But it also, I think it's a very great case study for we should be adapting these characters, whether they're, one of the leads or one of the main characters, I guess, or just a supporting cast. We could be, because however obscure they are, just like Guardians of the Galaxy, however obscure they are, they can be extremely successful if done right. But the Flash is not a protagonist per se. Yes, he has his own comics line and stuff like that, but he works best in support of another character. Like with Blue Beetle coming out, Blue Beetle's a great character. I like Jaime Reyes, but he's not Spider-Man. I think he would do great in relation to like Young Justice or maybe Teen Titans, or like in relation to Teen Titans, but not I'm the lead character. Because that movie looks like it's going to be an entertaining movie, but I don't see it being a good movie. It just
I
doesn't
could
look
see
like.
it potentially being a good movie. If anything, I'm just worried about it being too milk toast, too been there, done that. This movie doesn't really have anything new to bring to the table, and it feels like a
Yeah.
movie that's been sitting on a shelf since 2005.
Like watching the trailer, it does feel like a lot of what they're trying to do and a lot of undertones they're selling. It does feel like it's 2010, 2008, where we're still trying to figure out the tone of comedic but serious superhero films. It's like Jaime
And it's an
Reyes you
origin,
could just copy and paste Spider-Man. Like they're not all that different in terms of personality
and
and how
it's an
you work
origin
the character.
movie where the big bad villain is just an evil version of the superhero. Or like this is clearly another guy in some
Yeah.
kind of a suit.
It's and he's being adapted from the comics. I forget his name because forgettable, but yeah, it does feel like I don't know. I see it being. I'm definitely not going to see it in theaters. It does look like it's going to be an entertaining film for me. It does not. I do not think it's going to be maybe a fun film, entertaining film, not a good film. I don't think it's going to be something people are going to want to rewatch or revisit after the first
No,
viewing.
of all the things coming out in August, the thing I am most excited for is The Voyage of Demtier, because I adore vampires.
I used to
It's
like, yeah, I used to have this be obsessed with vampires for like a quick second, just because um, there were so many routes you can go with them, because there were so many things you could do. Like you could have vampires, because after Twilight and all that weirdness, we were getting genuine vampire like adaptations, and we got stuff like um, Being Human, which was an American. Well, I saw the American version, copy and paste of the British being human. But nonetheless, we got Stark. The I forget his name. The actor who plays Starkiller, or also Doomsday in Smallville, but the Starkiller, and that was a problem. But Starkiller in the Star Wars games, Star Wars Awakens, he was a vampire in that show. And it's just like, oh yeah, no, we evolved to where sunlight doesn't really bother us. Like, I think that's very, very smart. I also thought that was very, very smart where he was at dinner with like a girlfriend or something like that. He was eating dinner. It's like, oh, is there garlic? And he was covering his mouth. Is there garlic in this? And it's just all garlic does is just make his his fangs pop out. It's like, oh shit, they can't see. Like, I thought those are they were very neat and they're very cool. And that, like, how vampires have their little niche underground society. When they fuck up and they accidentally kill someone, they'll sweep it under the rug. But they're not like trying to rule over the world, kind of. I didn't finish the series just because I don't know if they do. That's my bad. But there was a lot of smart things they were doing with vampires that we didn't usually see. Like, even with Underworld, they were doing really smart things. That's not what you normally. Oh, you can't see your reflection and stuff like that. Whereas very kind of lazy or boring, and they were just readapting it. But it was not doing. It was very smart, and I'm interested to see what they do with that movie coming out in August that I can't pronounce the name of.
The Voyage of Damtier.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm interested to what they do with that, because that to me is a little bit interesting, because that's like act 2 of a 3-part, act story where Renfield meets Dracula in his castle in Transylvania, gets on the ship, then goes to London. And we're like, no. We're just gonna focus on the ship. It's like, oh, okay. How is this gonna go? What's new about this one?
You're doing a pure horror movie where it's like Dracula awakes from his tomb, and you're stuck with that motherfucker on a ship in the middle of nowhere with crashing seas. Like, there's nowhere for you to go. You're fucked.
Yeah. I think that's going to be pretty interesting. I'm hoping to do something new, because there's only so many times you can readapt the same story with the same points. So I'm looking forward to seeing, like, what what else do you have to bring to the table?
The trailer that they have a very unique take on Dracula here just appears to be a monster. He's not the dapper, suave, sensual, alluring guy. He's literally just this savage, feral monster.
Which I'm interesting to see how they do that, because it's easier to write a story where he is that suave guy and then turns into a monster. Because we have this. How do we explain the cargo on the ship? How do we explain, having but it's just like, no, he's just kind of there. From what we're seeing from the trailer, we don't actually know, but from what we're seeing, it's just okay. That I don't know. That's just I'm very curious and interested to seeing how they actually play that out.
That can be as simple as they've been tasked with transporting this coffin. They don't even know or care who's in it.
Exactly. Yeah. But who knows? It could just be a throwaway explanation just like that. Or it could be a little bit more complicated. We see like he originally in human form, but like progressively, or Renfield is there because we have no idea, but like, and then he progressively gets more grotesque and transforms into that monster throughout the film. But I don't know. I guess we'll see.
But yeah, this was a great discussion, David. I'm glad I brought you on. I think the next podcast that we will probably do is for Warrior, because I love Warrior. I got Nick into Warrior a couple weeks ago. We binged season 1 in 2 days, and then he took it upon himself to continue to get caught up. He's a little over halfway through season 2 right now.
Okay.
And episode 7 of the 3rd season airs this week. So like you have, there's plenty of time because I mean, like I said, Nick's not caught up either. There's plenty of time for you guys to get caught up before we do a spoiler discussion on that show. But I would like to bring more attention to a show that is still, by all accounts, ignorantly overlooked. Like it's a crime that more people aren't talking about this show because it deserves to be in the same conversation with Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones. In my opinion, it's absolutely on that level, and it'd be nice to talk about that show. But yeah, until then,
Okay, I'll try to catch up so I can join the conversation. Yeah, because I'd love to talk about like shows like that as well. Like I don't hear people talking about Silo, and Silo is just such a good film. And a lot of people talking about Foundation, but I don't think they're talking about Foundation as nearly as much as I think they should be talking about Silo and Foundation. Like those are really, really good shows. But yeah, I'll try to catch up on Warrior so I could hop on the next stream.
sounds good, buddy. This was David and Malik signing off.